call me soda pop can man. Whoa. And I don't do well with pressure. Such a friendly gesture now. Just keep me out of the freezer. And don't give me a cold shoulder. 'Cause I am just a fragile can. Whoa. And you could crush me, crush me, crush me with your hand. So just tap me with your finger and I'll understand. So just tap me with your finger, I won't overflow again. I'm not who you think I am. Whoa. They call me soda pop can man. Don't do well with pressure. It's such a friendly gesture now. Just get me out of the freezer. And don't give me the cold shoulder. 'Cause I am just a fragile man. I'm a castle made of sand. Here comes the tide again to wash me out to sea again. Such a friendly gesture now. Just keep me out of the freezer. And don't give me the cold shoulder. 'Cause I am just a fragile can. Whoa. You could crush me, crush me, crush me with your hand. So just tap me with your finger and I'll understand.
This shirt is from my friends from Faith Unaltered, my friend's channel that I mod on. Isn't that cool? Faith Unaltered. Oh, and I think I have someone from that channel with us. Hey.
Hi.
What is the deal with this Faith Unaltered channel? Tell us about it.
Oh, this is a great channel. So I joined up over there last month. They invited me to come on. And the thing I like about Faith Unaltered is they love to talk to an ecumenical mix, which means everybody's welcome. So as long as you don't cause a massive problem, you know, by saying stuff that just is unnecessarily divisive, then everybody's welcome. And we've had on just about kind of anybody you could imagine on there. Jamie's been on there several times, open mic nights. It's great. And you're supposed to come on with me because we're going to talk about Seventh-day Adventism. And you're going to get to make the case and explain and talk about what are Seventh-day Adventists and why you're not a bunch of heretics and why you are a bunch of heretics. And so that's going to be fun. And we got Catholics and Orthodox and, you know, Reformed and just about everybody over there having positive conversations, which is really nice. And they love to get into the supernatural and explore the weird, like a cosmic corner from your hoodie there. they like weird stuff, so they're into talking about all kinds of weird things. And there you go, right there, Cosmic Corner. That is Joshua Davidson and Jalen Thompson. Jalen Thompson is also a new addition on Faith Unaltered. Fantastic. I love the guy. Jalen is awesome. And then Courtney and I also do Hebrew Bible Breakdown, where we talk about all kinds of really, really nerdy stuff, and we get into Hebrew and hermeneutics and methodologies and all kinds of cool stuff. And Carrie Griffin has her Pilgrims in the Holy Land. They talk about early church, the church fathers, ancient Near East culture, like really cool stuff there. And let's see what else. Dane is supposed to be coming back. And he's going to be starting up his segment again, but this time he's focusing on praxis and the power of prayer and how to live out your faith in a way that is really just kind of practical kinds of things. So it's just really, I love it because it just is a place to gather with people from a lot of different traditions. And so you get to hear people out and let people explain for themselves and talk about, and we talk about controversial issues, but we try to do it in a way that is, with, generous and ecumenically diverse, friendly. So everybody has a spot and a voice. We even have had one is Pentecostals on. I mean, just about a lot of different, it's a good mix. So, yeah. And hi everybody in the chat. I'm having some computer issues today, so I'm not going to be really responding to, but I'll see your messages. So hello everybody. It's good to see all of you. And I always enjoy coming on here. Jamie has one of the nicest live chat groups that I get to interact with. And so I appreciate everybody who comes and watches Jamie's channel, because you're all so nice and I love it.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm mean by myself, but when I get other people, I mean well. So, and I just want to say hi, Sarap. Hey, Terry, Shannon, Deborah. Good to see you all. The link is pinned. Anyone's welcome to join. It's an open chat. It's a secret ecumenical movement. So somebody was in the back, but they left. So I'm hoping more people will join just so we can talk about whatever anybody wants to talk about. But if you have any questions, tag me in the chat about anything. And let's see. Yeah. Hit the like and subscribe. I'm waiting. I know that at least one other person's coming, but yeah, I put the link to Faith Unaltered. I mod on that channel. Amber has a new segment on the channel, and they're with different views on there. They're not Seventh-day Adventists. So
no, we're not. But we're cool anyway.
They're not quite there yet, but no, we'll get them. We'll get them. No, I'm just kidding. I don't operate that. I don't want to operate that way, even though I do believe what I believe. But
Well, and I think, Jamie, that it's really cool that like Faith Unaltered and interacting a lot more in those kind of contexts. I think that one of the things we forget in our staying in our lanes with our labels is how much we actually agree on things. Jamie and I agree on a lot of stuff, and I am not a Seventh-day Adventist, but we agree on several different points. And the things that we do disagree on are just, I think, well, to me, I think more technicalities, because, I am very much I'm very much a believer in the Sabbath, and people need to observe a Sabbath, but I'm not gonna, that having it have to be on Saturday is not a hill I'm willing to die on. So, like those are the kinds of things that so far we've disagreed on, that we've actually talked about. And but for the most part, most of Protestantism has a lot more in common than they remember that they do. So which I think is really a good thing that Faith Unaltered is we're going to be working on this year, is having a lot more of those kinds of, hey guys, remember, we actually agree on more than we think we do kinds of things. So that'll be really, I think, fun.
Yeah, for sure. I invited some of these people from your channel. Let's see. Trying to get a hold of some of them are working, I think. Doesn't
Some of them. Hey.
So what should we talk about? Any ideas? I didn't have anything planned. Usually a bunch of people show up, so come on, but we'll see. I mean, I'm pulling up the Bible right now.
Okay. Well, that's kind of opening a can of worms, but
Okay.
we could talk about the Saturday thing, because I'm still not convinced that it has to be. Well, okay. So although I am changing my opinion on this a little bit, but not because of the Adventists, but because of something else. But I'm not completely and totally have to be married to it has to be on Saturday. Like, I'm on the fence on this.
Well, let me pull up a document, since this is where I would go. Let me see if I can find it. Sorry. Actually, it might be easier for me to just find it I posted it not too long ago. Could go over this. Maybe you could check some of these documents if you have them. I have the references. Let's see. As I have this paper that I thought was pretty interesting about a lot of people say a lot of stuff about the early church that may or may not be accurate.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Deborah asked the question. I'd say I'm conservative. Well, okay, because I have somewhat of a less traditional view on women pastors. I'm open to that idea, let's say. Although I haven't always been that position. And I think I take a nuanced view of the atonement, and perhaps the how we should approach sexual ethics. I'm still conservative in that view. I just think Christianity has failed at how to approach those things. And so, but a conservative meaning Christian ethics and living. I'm conservative. I have a conservative reading of the Bible, I guess you could say. I don't know. So I'm just saying but I have nuanced views where some people will label you a nuance. I'm not I think abortion is killing a human being, but I'm nuanced. I think the conversation is not nuanced enough because it gets so, I don't know, help me out, Amber. Like, what am I trying to say here?
What? I'm not sure. What are you saying? Why you're conservative and that's not a bad thing, or why you shouldn't be as conservative as you are? I don't know. What are you saying exactly?
I'm saying my views are conservative, but I think the approach conservatives often take is not exemplifying the character of Christ often. That's what I'm saying, I guess.
Joshua Davidson said he would love to come say hi, but he's going to take that too. But he's driving home from work and he'll be home in about 10 minutes and then he'll come say hi. So I dropped the StreamYard link in the Faith Unaltered crew chat. So all of the co-hosts from Faith Unaltered have access to come say hi if they want to.
Yes, and let them know if they don't come, they are not saved, and the Pope has spoken. So I guess I let's see. Okay, so second part of that question. Are you one of those people who thinks you have to wear a suit and tie to church and women should wear dresses? I like that idea, but I don't. If a woman wants to wear a pantsuit to church, or a guy, a new convert to the faith, doesn't have a suit, I'm probably going to go hang out with that person in the church and have fun, rather than give the stank eye. And but I'm pro dressing up for church in your nice clothes. So you know what I'm saying? Like I'm for eating healthy and following the Adventist food law. I admire people who do, as long as they're not like hating on everybody. But I don't think, you have to do that or you're not a Christian or you're not you're not serious. I guess that's what I'm saying. Hopefully that helps a little bit.
I'm a little.
Do you have to wear a suit and tie to church?
Do I? I don't think people are gonna like my answer. So no.
Good.
I just I think sometimes. Okay, I'm gonna try to nuance this, but people are not gonna like it anyway. But that's okay. I've gotten in trouble a lot the last few days, so I just keep getting in trouble. I think that sometimes our overly individualistic view on faith and praxis can sometimes make us overly concerned or overly sensitive, maybe, to the fact that God focuses on all of the little, like stressing out about all the little details. And not to say God doesn't care about all us and us as individuals and all of the things that in our day and the things that we deal with in our lives. But I think sometimes we get too focused on, does if I eat frosted flakes instead of raisin bran for breakfast, is God going to get mad at me? Like, I don't think God really wants, he wants us to be good stewards of what we're given, but I don't think one breakfast choice different from my normal is going to get God mad at me. Like, I don't think God gets that wrapped up into our I think we have a lot more liberty to to make decisions that God just is like, if here's your choice, and you get to make that choice, and God's like, here's the good that I've designed for you, and that should, in pursuing relationship with God, we should pursue the good as he designed it. That I don't get overly
Yeah. I think
concerned that God gets mad about you wear blue jeans instead of black jeans to church. I don't think God cares. I really don't.
right, but I'm sure you have somewhat of the idea that, like, people are in the chat are saying,
Mhm,
it's kind of like that, where it's like the church is a hospital, but there's
mhm.
also like, but that doesn't mean everything goes. And so,
Well, I think that a lot of Protestant denominations and Protestant thinking has lost an idea of reverence and holiness. So I definitely don't think you want to go if your normal level of respectful dress is a certain standard. Going to church in ripped up jeans and something that you haven't washed for 2 weeks and that you would normally wear to the beach, that's not going to be reflective of the respect and reverence that the holy presence meeting with God is should reflect in your desire to honor that by showing up looking at least if a respectful appearance. But to dictate what that is, I think you're going to run into problems if the best you can do is a hoodie and a pair of jeans with a hole in the knee, because normally that's an upgrade from your daily whatever you're wearing. That's an upgrade. So that is trying to wear the best that you have as a show of respect and reverence for gathering with believers to worship God. And that the heart, I think, is what matters, not so much following some checklist that says you have to wear this or you have to wear that. I think it's more a reflection of the heart and the desire to show reverence and respect than it is that women are going to go to hell if you wear pants to church. That's a problem. So yeah.
yeah, I'm all, I like traditional outfits. I like
Mhm.
to see a woman in a dress, but I think, but I think it's just like if somebody comes to church and you're like smirking at them or making them feel like,
Mhm.
ugh, there's, I could like imagine like somebody new comes to church and all they have is ripped up jeans, and everybody is just like having fun with them without being creepy or whatever, but like being welcoming and friendly. And then as they come accustomed to the church and build relationships, if they need help or poor, you have fun with it. You could go help them get nicer clothes because, in a fun way or whatever, rather than you have to do this or you're not.
Well, that's something that comes with relationship too. I mean, you don't want to have the wardrobe police at the door. Like if someone is trying to find or reconnect with God and the first thing they're met with is, well, hey, let's go funly buy you some new clothes. That's going to be the message of you're not welcome here until you meet our standards. And I don't think that at all. You would never see Jesus do something like that. Like, Jesus didn't turn anyone who is honestly seeking him was never rebuked or turned away. The only ones who were rebuked or turned away were those who were leading others into error, like the Pharisees. So, there is an expectation that once you are in relationship with Jesus, there are standards and expectations that are to meet the demands of God's holiness and to be in line in relationship with a holy God and a loving God who wants the best for us. And that includes taking care of ourselves and stewarding well what we have. That I don't think that immediately saying that someone who is trying to get back off on their feet after a run of bad luck in life, that's trying to find God and trying to find that relationship and trying to find community to reconnect to, that the first thing we need to do is take them to Target and buy them in clothes to be acceptable in community. I think that's going to come later out of the part of helping them to finding Jesus is the most important thing. And we need to help people who are looking to introduce them to find Jesus in where they're, because Jesus is like, if you're searching, I'm going to meet you there. But we need to help them by not being the ones who put the barriers in their way and chase them off because of our own expectations. So yeah, that's what I think.
Hey boys, what's up, boys?
Hello. How you guys doing?
Good.
Batman, did you just say something?
Do you have any thoughts on that?
Oh, well, yeah, I agree. The most important thing overall is always to just help people through Christ, come to the faith and believe in Jesus. And I think that's the most important thing. Then whatever conviction comes afterward in their heart, let that happen, but don't be too pushy. And obviously you could tell that God does have standards in how you should dress and things of that nature. Like, for example, you could even bring up like the priest, like the high priest, like they had a dress code. They had a way of dressing when they had to go into like the most holy places and things of that nature. So obviously that's one example of God wanting a specific way of you dressing to be presentable towards the activity or action that you're going to partake in. So there's that, but at the same time, there is freedom in Christ. So the primary thing should always be to come to believe in the Lord and be a good servant to him. And then whatever conviction you feel afterwards, like how I said at the start, let that happen through time. Sanctification is a long process, so you should never be pushing unless they're being directly disobedient to God and they're unrepentant. But that's a whole nother subject. But yeah, I fully agree with Amber.
I'm sure Batman doesn't wear his costume to church. Oh, we have another guest.
Hey,
I guess this other, yeah, good to have you. I want to hear your thoughts on this too. One other person's coming in. I guess the guys at Cosmic Corner are saved. Praise God. You're
what's
saved.
up, man?
Hey, hi Josh, how you doing?
I'm all right. I'm upright, breathing. God's good.
Awesome. I don't
Check.
necessarily think Christ cares about your attire so much as you maintain cleanliness and respect. It kind of reminds me of in the Sermon on the Mount where he asked the people, why do you worry about clothes? And he compared the flowers of the field of how intricate and beautiful they are, and not even Solomon's dressing was as beautiful and intricate, and yet those flowers, they basically get, picked and burnt up, right? So it's just more so, I think he's more so saying you should kind of focus on your relationship with him, and less so about your looks. But I do think that obviously the physical cleanliness and the respect for other worshipers is also important, right? So you dress appropriately and make sure you're clean. However, the whole Sunday best thing, at least the church that I go to, I don't even go as much as I used to, but they don't really care how you dress, right? As long as, even if you smell, they have facilities and they have clothes there that, that they can sponsor someone and give them something decent to wear. So, but the concern is more so the relationship with Christ and facilitating that to a point where someone doesn't have to worry about being judged. So it's more so that's the focus of the church, helping people be comfortable in coming to Christ versus, just kind of maintaining looks and keeping up with the Joneses.
So they kind of slowly take you into workspace sort of. It's not like you have to do this, you have to do that. It's more like a slow process of kind of backdooring the working for your salvation. Is that what you're saying?
Of course, a workstation is supposed to say that.
No, I hear you. That's good. Excellent. So, Josh, what it is?
What's up, man? Looking sharp, bro. I like it. I'm glad that came out good.
It does. It's excellent. And I even got that one under there too.
Yes.
I kind of
Yes,
went twice.
man.
I'm kind of a big deal. I win a lot. What can I say?
Does the hoodie fit good? Does it feel comfortable?
Yeah.
Good. I tried to make
I'm
sure I
really
picked good
tall,
material.
so I could have gone up one size probably, but it doesn't. It's not too small. Yeah. I'm like 6'4", and it works. It fits great. It's perfect.
Nice. That's what's up. Praise God, man.
Yeah.
That's cool. Yes, Joshua Davidson, like Faith Unaltered. Yep, that's right.
That's the one. Yeah, they're that famous channel. They give out prizes, and so I would subscribe because some guy won like $100 the other day.
They did.
I won a sweater. I almost won the $100, but I'm pleased. I'm quite pleased. So what's up with what are you doing in Cosmic Corner over there anyway?
Presently I'm taking a much needed mental break because I did 3 Cosmic Corner episodes in a week over the last week or so. I did an episode on the symbolism of life and death through symbols of life and death through scripture and narrative. And then I did an episode exploring Satan's playbook, temptation and sin. That was legit. I really enjoyed that episode. And then I did a one-on-one conversation with my new co-host Jalen about racial identity and the image of God on Friday. And so my brain is thoroughly saturated with things I need to chew on for the next month. And it's been a trip, man. It's a lot to do. I'm used to doing about one Cosmic Corner a month because there's a lot that happens and there's a lot to chew on in there. 3 in a week, it's pretty overwhelming.
Yeah, your new co-host is a pretty smart guy. And you currently go to a fellowship at a Calvary chapel, but it's kind of like you're in one of the works-based chapters. Is that right?
My pastor would love to hear that. That's hilarious. Yeah, I do attend and serve at a Calvary chapel right now. I wouldn't say that I necessarily am like an official Calvaryite kind of person, because I wouldn't agree with a lot of their distinctives. It's ironic that a non-denominational has distinctives, but I'll leave that alone. But I don't necessarily sign off on anything in that sense, like explicitly, but I agree with much of what my pastor does and says, and he's been a good spiritual head for me, and he's been incredibly loving and gracious with me in my formative years over the last 12, 13 years or so, growing in the Lord. And he's probably been the one to foster most of my curiosity and my freedom to inquire as I have. And so he's been very, very important to the way that I've come to explore Christianity. The Calvary Chapel is technically non-denominational. I don't know. Protestant is a little loose. Non-denominational. It's like Baptist Light, basically, right? I am Orthodox friendly. I am also Catholic friendly, but I call myself a liturgical leaning mutt, because I have a lot of influences, but very little allegiances, if that makes sense. Like I don't claim colors, but I'm on everybody's team in some real genuine sense because of the overlap in my influences. And so there's a lot of weaknesses and blind spots in the kind of a la carte buffet version of Christianity that some of us have come to engage with. But I'm seeing fruit where I'm at, so I don't feel a sense of urgency to jump ship. But if God can use a donkey,
Yeah, I quite like Josh's. When I've seen him preach, I've grabbed some of it. Obviously, I'm works-based salvation, so when he is preaching, I was able to use that to my advantage to make people work for their salvation. Ha ha ha! It's kind of an ongoing joke. I identify very strongly with this idea of being. Let me put it in there. I'm into this idea of being a saved-based worksationist, and I think that more evangelical Protestants should get on board with being a saved-based worksationist, because that's the point of the gospel, in my opinion. Any thoughts, Ken?
That's what I agree. I agree 100%. I definitely don't find that wording weird.
Yeah, so my goal, I go and I do this in kind of a fun, but like I tell my friends when I talk to them privately, I constantly, I'm like, you're not saved, you're saved, you're not saved. I want to make that, because I used to have people come around and they get obsessed and they just turn into thinking that the faith is going around telling everybody they're not saved because they believe you're supposed to do stuff in the spirit and walk, convert people, reflect the love of Jesus. I don't think those are optional. Even if hypothetically someone can be saved without having any fruit, even if that is true, that's not the call. And so I want to make going around calling people worrying about wanting to hear you say I'm saved. I want to make that lame. That's my goal. Not because we don't have concerns about this or that, but because it's like gaslighting. And so I want to make that lame again, I guess, is my point, I guess.
Yeah, that you do have a point. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Sometimes my mic cuts
We
out.
just weren't listening.
Okay. Yeah.
Kidding.
Well. Now I just feel bad now. But yeah, you have a point in that. Um, a lot of people are quick to say that they're saved, and most of the time it's like some sort of cop out to not feel convicted by anything. And I've dealt with some people like that already, and is a lot like I said is just an excuse to try and not feel convicted of any sin that they might have committed. And slowly they just end up becoming a form some type of antinomian because of how much they try to just say, oh, I'm saved, I'm saved, I'm saved. Obviously we could have assurance in Christ that we're saved, but fruits are obviously something that has to show after your after the saving faith that you've been gifted with. So I do agree with you that um in the sense that the fruits need to show. Obviously there's no way you are truly saved if you're out here doing the complete opposite of what God wants you to do. So yeah, I agree.
What do you think, Amber and Josh and Batman? I mean, like, how do you think we should approach this idea with people? Traditionally, most people when say you should be, um, Protestants usually are harping. I think it's deteriorated into a thing where now people think righteousness by faith is just making a claim, and if anybody disagrees anything after that, they're heretics. And then people think they're Christians because they're defending that proposition. But the thing is, it's like I don't totally disagree with the proposition that is the basis of salvation. It's just like when they make that the only point, it's kind of like it's just not what the Bible is teaching, I would say, is how I would look at it. And so how do you there's such a straw man there. What do you think, Josh? What do you say about this?
The question is about like whether like the role of works is right. Like, okay, so I think that this problem is one of those things that we can address by like zooming out quite a lot, because most people are hyper focused on the role of something in relation to let's say your entrance into unity with the Father through Christ, rather than what role works actually play in somebody who has unity to the Father through Christ. I don't think that anybody, even granting that some people have a very strange view of synergism, I don't think that anybody actually has in mind that they're going to somehow create an infinite ladder from us to God and just climb our way to heaven. That being said, viewing faith as primarily intentional trusting allegiance toward God, I think solves a lot of these problems. And I think also that given the central facet of Christianity is incarnational, namely that Christ is deified and that he is the exacted model of the image of God before us, and that he's our model ultimately. And so if that's the case and our theology is centered around something that is ultimately embodied, we need to be able to embody our theology. And if we can't, I think it's actually a demarcation of how much error we're in, because it's not necessarily about an accomplishment. Like salvation is not a paycheck, and I don't think anybody should be shy about saying salvation is not a paycheck. God doesn't deal in wages, but that doesn't mean that you're uninvolved. And I think that's where people get really screwy, is they try to draw a line that says either I'm entirely uninvolved or salvation is a paycheck. And I just don't see that that's actually the dichotomy there.
How are you, Batman?
Okay, so this is not really something I thought about deeply, to be quite frank. I think if I were to ask someone, are they saved? I wouldn't necessarily question what they mean by that. A matter of fact, the other day I was in a stream and I was kind of irked where a brother was asking another brother about his saved status, right? And one brother said, "Hey, listen, my all my deeds are like filthy rags, and I do have faith in Christ. I believe I am saved. I don't know that I'm saved." And brother number one said, "Well, if you sit with me for a couple minutes, I can guarantee you that you are saved and you will go to heaven when you die." And I'm like, huh, such authority, right? I didn't engage in the conversation because I was working on one of my papers. But yeah, that was probably one of the few instances that bothered me. I don't know why it bothered me more than, I guess, another Christian saying, "Hey, you're not saved because you hold to this particular doctrine." Like, if you believe Jesus is just a normal dude, no different than anyone else, right? He's just an agent, right? And someone questions whether or not someone is saved, if that's based on their belief. I guess I could understand that. But I think Christ has enough mercy to understand that some people are idiots. Um, you know, so I wouldn't say even someone in that particular situation isn't saved as long as they hold to the gospel at the end of the day. But I don't have like any strong positions or feelings as yet on this particular issue.
Like Mike Todd said, you can be dumb and saved.
Someone actually said that.
Yeah. He said that in a sermon. That was very interesting.
Um, to be fair, right? I think it's easier for someone who is quote quote dumb to be saved, mainly because I guess it requires some level of naivete, so to speak, right? Where like as myself, right? Like I was steeped into philosophy, and the various argumentations, and my outlook on religion on a whole was more educational, so to speak, right? And a lot of the things that I read colloquially in the Bible, right, didn't make sense to me, and a lot of that was obviously because I didn't get the context in which they were taking place in the first place. But in an earnest reading, right, and experiencing the Spirit, right, I you know here I am, right. Does it mean that I've gotten dumber for for believing? Sincerely, no. If anything, believing has changed my disposition to, that allows me to be a more understanding individual and to be a more considerate person and to be more patient towards people, considering my nihilistic tendencies, right? So, yeah, that's my opinion on it.
I'm not convinced yet that God can save man babies, but I suppose that's probably he probably could do that.
Are you being sarcastic?
I don't mean I'm a man, comma baby. I mean man babies. But
Oh, you mean like literal man, baby? Like the
I mean like grown man
Mhm.
who acts like children.
He was gonna say something else. I just want to let you know.
He was going to say babies versus giants.
Oh man. Yeah, yeah. I I agree. I kind of agree with you, Batman. That I guess it all depends on the individual. Honestly, again, at the end of the day, it's a personal relationship with Christ, and you know what's going on between you and Him. So, I guess that's just it.
I think the relationship with Christ is there's a reason why you're told to look at, you know, you can look at the works that they do, the fruits that they bear, if they bear any, right? And that'll kind of give you an idea of the relationship that they have with Christ. Because your relationship with Christ, a lot of it is grounded in how you treat other people and how you see other people. And so if you're bearing, you know, bad fruits, right? I think it's safe to say you're probably having a bad relationship with Christ. Or if you're bearing no fruits at all, right? You're probably not having a really good relationship with Christ. So I think that's what you have to look at. But even when you do see that, right, I don't think it's within our authority or even our responsibility to even call out people's righteousness or lack thereof, or even practice our own. Not that I'm saying that you can't correct a brother or sister earnestly, but as long as you're not doing it to show your own quote unquote moral superiority, right? Considering no man can have that, being that because again, all of the things that you do outside of Christ, without Christ being the source of that, right? It's like filthy rags. Right?
Okay, let me
Useless.
make a claim, and then I'd like to hear Amber first respond, and then also Josh and everybody too. But okay, here what if I was to say this? Jesus says, "I've made you clean." That means saves you. If you're following, if you've come to Jesus, you're saved. That's what it says. That's what the idea here is. And then he's like, you have to. He's like, I'm the vine, you're the branches. He's talking to saved people who he's made clean. He says, his words make them clean. Then he says, I'm the vine, you're the branches. That means he's the source of what is needed. If you abide in me, you'll bear fruit. Jesus says you'll know them by their fruit. And then he talks about people who don't go into the kingdom that he never knew. And he told him you'll know them by their fruit. And here he says, if you stay connected to me, you will bear fruit, much fruit, because without me, you can do nothing. If anyone does not abide in me, he is cast out as a branch and is withered, which would mean, you'd be worse off than never being connected to the vine, you could say, right? Because having known the way of righteousness, to turn from the holy commandment, you're like a dog who eats his own vomit. You're not just a sick dog, you're eating your own vomit. That means you're worse than and then he says, if you don't abide, and by the way, that means stay, remain, stay with me, remain with me. That's what that word means. If only the King James would have said stay. I think a lot of people would be a little more confronted. So here's my comment, and you guys can respond and tell me what you think about this verse, or maybe how I should see it differently, starting with Amber and then Josh and then everybody. But I'm saying it is better. If anybody who abides in Jesus is better. It not ontologically, but let's make obeying God by loving God and loving others great again. It is. People always like, well, are you better? Are you choice? It's better to follow Jesus, and you have to follow Jesus. That's what Jesus says. If you don't, you're going to wither and you'll be thrown into the fire. Am I allowed to say that?
Go ahead, Amber.
Are you allowed to say that? I would say yes, because I think this is where we saw Israel get in trouble all the time. This word abide is linked to the idea of ishav, of dwell in the Old Testament. Like this is tabernacle language, and this thriving in the vine, that is covenant fulfillment. imagery. And so when you dwell in relationship with God, there is fruit, there is life there. But if you remove yourself from that dwelling, you're going to die because you cut yourself off from the source of life. So yeah, I don't think you're out of bounds there at all.
What do you think, Josh? I mean, people confront me all the time and tell me I'm works based, I'm a heretic. It's like, and I'm just like, I just believe Jesus in the Bible. I don't like it when you pretend like this verse isn't for a Christian, or this verse doesn't mean what it says, or this, you know what I mean? Sorry, go ahead.
No, you're good. I think one of the things that you were trying to say, it's very difficult to say without pointing in a way that feels very ugly and uncomfortable to modern Americanized Western ears, is the idea that if something is better, it's actually better. And we're concerned by saying, oh well, you know, we're so concerned with equality as a virtue that we've forgotten that equality, and this is a C.S. Lewis thing, I didn't make this up, equality is medicine, not food. It's there to help when things have gone wrong, to draw people back into a proper unity amongst one another as a community. Equality under the law, equality of opportunity, that's wonderful, that's good. But to pretend like every soul is actually equal to another soul, equal means same, and we aren't the same. We shouldn't be the same. If everyone were the same and we were all the exact same level of awful at the bottom floor of reality, then we would have no one to emulate. We would have no good role models. We would have no one to look up to. To look up, that image literally means someone's above you, right? Like you like, in order to have someone that you find to be a let's say that person who is a righteous man whose prayer availeth much, that has to be better. Like, rather definitionally, he has to be better. And in what way is he better? It's like in the means by which he maintains unity with God, not by being the unity, but by participating in the unity, right? So it's like, I'm not, again, God doesn't deal in wages, so I'm not accomplishing unity with God. I'm participating in unity with God. And one of I forget who it was that mentioned it, but this is made manifest. This is made obvious. We express that unity to God by how it is that we treat our fellow imagers. That's why the second commandment is like unto the first. Love God with all your mind, heart, soul, and strength. And we like that abstraction because it leaves us with nothing to do about it. But the second commandment is like unto it, in that it is in fact that you love your neighbor as yourself. This is the expression of the first commandment. And John says, if you can't love your brother who you see, you don't love God who you do not see. And I think it's really very straightforward, right? If we're not participating in Christ, we're not living in and with Christ, then we're not expressing a unity to the Father through Christ. I really think it's very straightforward. And so it's not necessarily, again, it's not that God deals in wages. It is that God deals in reality. And reality is an incarnate place. And your belief, your allegiance, your unity to the Father should be incarnated through you. Otherwise, it's rather useless language to say that the body of Christ is present in the earth and it's supposed to be made manifest by all of the various individuals who participate in that body. If that body is actually functionally dead, and Christ's incarnation part 2 is functionally a vegetable, then I don't see that God's actively pursuing a kingdom in the earth the way that he described. And so it kind of lends itself naturally to looking at this as like, okay, either Christ's body is paralyzed in some places and he's just going to have to be okay with that, or the body should be able to function. And it's not like, I don't think that it has to be a very controversial thing to say. If you are cut off from the source of life, let's say I cut my thumb off, my thumb won't remain alive for very long.
Lost you, buddy. Your thumb? Your thumb?
You should have said finger.
Maybe you should.
It has its duty.
Well, I think to until Josh gets back, to piggyback kind of on what he said, there's very much in Torah this idea where when Israel is born at the feet at Mount Sinai, God declares them holy and then gives them the instructions in Torah to not only live that holiness out in obedience, which is where you get the saved base per stationist is right out of Torah. And then that also in the sanctification praxis process increases their holiness. So it gives them a standard to continue to meet. But it's also because God is God and we are not, it gives us an even higher standard to shoot for. So while we have a high standard already, we have to continue to always continue up. There's a really interesting phrase that I've run across with talking to some of my Orthodox friends. They talk about further up, further in. And I love that idea because no matter where you are in your spiritual walk, you always have further steps to go up higher and higher, further into relationship with God, up and up and up. And there's, it just continue that challenge of growing and living out your faith, because Hebrew does this really fun thing where it'll take an abstract concept like faith, and then it will have works together with it. They're not a separate idea in Hebrew. Faith is the abstract and works is the demonstration of that abstract. So you can't have faith without works. The two are interdependent. You see one, it's a book of James. You have faith, so you have works because it's the expression of that faith. And then the living out of those works increases your faith, which increases either the quality, quantity, or both of your faith. So it's this rolling cycle of continuing to grow and continuing to grow your faith by your works with your faith. So it's cyclical that takes you up, and you keep leveling up. Like think of like video games, right? You just keep leveling up until finally you get to the end of your time that you're granted on earth, and then you just and then there you are. So yeah, and Josh is back, I think. Yay.
Yeah, sorry about that. My laptop died. But I
Welcome
didn't
back.
realize that it was that dead until it finally just the screen went black, and I was like, oh, okay. So yeah, I pretty much spoke my piece, but I wanted to be able to hop back on and thank you, Jamie, for having us on here and everything. I gotta give my wife her kitchen back, so I gotta hop off of here in a second, but I definitely was pleased to be able to catch with you guys. And sweet gear, bro. Awesome. I'm so glad that came out really well. And it looks like
Awesome.
looks pretty good. Like
it looks great. I mean, I don't mean to brag, but I'm kind of a model.
Show off the back. The back's even cooler. I love the back of that one. That's awesome.
Dude, yeah, and I took the time to design each of these specifically. All the logos I put together myself in order to do all these designs, and so yeah, pretty sweet. I feel pretty proud of that because I'm not a very techie person, but I'm kind of artsy, so tried to do a good job.
Definitely kind of artsy. Yeah, I would definitely burn that.
Oh man, yeah, I definitely still need to get Jamie. I have to get Jamie on a Cosmic Corner episode one time. That'd be good. So for sure. Now you officially have the uniform.
I'm loaded up too, man. I got a lot for you.
Heck yeah.
Josh, what's your channel's name?
It's called Faith Unaltered, but my segment is called Cosmic Corner. If you look up Cosmic Corner on YouTube, my playlist will be the first thing that comes up. And there's a bunch of stuff on there that's relative to basically what I talk about is the image of God as a main emphasis. And I use narrative and symbolism as a lens through which I talk about perception and interpretation. Not only
lost you.
Yeah, that was weird. Interpretation and perception, not only of scripture, but also of your daily life, and looking at human interaction at every level of resolution, from the individual to relationships to community to governmental and national, and then finally global, and then historical, the entire scope of human history as something that makes sense because of the way that the scriptures explain man's relation to God, man's relation to creation, and man's relation to other humans, right? And so if are interested in the image of God and how that informs the entire cosmos, then that's pretty much my shtick.
All right, cool. Well, I'll take a peek at your channel because you had a fair bit of good stuff to say. So,
well, I
interested.
appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah,
That's because he's a workstationist.
He's a saved
Yep.
based. Yeah, let's do an ecumenical movement called saved based workstationism.
dude, I think we'd be
legit.
called the biggest heretics on YouTube. That'd be fun. That'd have a lot of fun.
I'll be the Pope, and I'll appoint bishops. So,
Remember to have
for-
your Pope socks
good to have
on.
you,
So.
Oh man.
when I first met John, I'm gonna have to pull that up because I think I'm quite amused with myself over it. One of my first. Let's see if I can find it here. Josh, I clipped up Josh's awesome rant and then put it to like foreboding music and like did an animation. Because he was making a really funny point. It's like, luckily Josh gets me. Like we're on the same wavelength on my like the way I joke around. I think he always gets me. A lot of people misunderstand me sometimes, but Josh is like, I love that clip too, where I was making fun of you for lying to your kids.
Dude, the Santa thing, that was so great.
You're like, well, yeah. Yeah. That was
Oh
fun.
yeah, that was a good one. But yeah, for sure. I appreciate you guys so much. I gotta hop off of here, but have a wonderful, wonderful night.
Good night.
Yeah, good night, brother. God bless.
Well, I'm looking that up.
Tim, I wasn't fast enough with my unmute.
That's okay, Amber.
Don't worry, you're not safe.
Certain things. Well, there you go, Jamie. Pope Jamie has answered.
Jamie calls me unsaved all the time. I'm starting to doubt his ability to actually declare me unsaved. I'm suspicious at this point.
I tell her at least once a day, at least.
Talking about that, I watched a video on this one brother's channel. I believe he's like I believe he's an historian or something, but it's called Ready. His channel's name is called Ready to Harvest. And I watched a 30-minute video on JW's doctrines because I studied their doctrines when I first came into the faith, and because I wanted to see all like the inconsistencies that they had and everything, but I forgot quite a bit of them. So I went back and watched like the video when he showed all the details of what they believed, and how can you believe that Jesus of Nazareth died, completely ceased to exist, and then a spirit version of Jesus was born, was created, and now we have Jesus Christ, meaning the Jesus that was on earth disappeared and he no longer exists. Though the Jesus that they supposedly believe in now is a whole new Jesus. Like what
That's
the
the
heck?
Jehovah's Witness view, I think, right?
Yeah. I'm like, I didn't even know what to say. I just kept my mouth open like for 3 minutes. I couldn't believe that was actually something they believe. They don't
It's
even
not that
believe
far
that this
from
is the same Jesus.
Unitarianism.
I don't even know what that is. Now I understand why some of them don't even like to call themselves Arians, because it's not even Arianism. It's just
Yeah, Arianism was less heretical, quote unquote, whatever.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Okay, let me play this thing of Josh real quick that I made. It's really dorky, but real fast.
I like being dorky.
We're babies versus giants. It's just the world that you're born into. Nobody is going to be a baby and outpower their parents, and they rule the world. We're babies versus giants, and they're huge and they're powerful, a source of terror, and they rule the world. We're babies versus giants. everything is massive, everything is overwhelming, every source of terror, and they rule the world. We're babies versus giants. And we're babies versus giants.
Okay,
It's
so
pretty funny.
I get okay, so I understand the baby versus giant thing now. I thought it was just has that always been an inside joke?
Yeah, it was just it was a fun Cosmic Corner episode, and he was like making an interesting point. And then I interviewed Josh, and you can look it up too on my channel where we talked about Jordan Peterson and stuff. And it's just the point's funny, but I pulled it out of context. It's kind of a he's like, what is he talking about, right? But the point he was making made a lot of sense in context, and so it's like an opportunity to realize about context and like matters, right? Obviously.
Yeah. You know, one of the just kind of going back to the previous topic real quick. One of the things that completely fascinated me, or just fascination is one thing, but more so kind of like really and truly humbled me was when Jesus washed his disciples' feet, right? And Peter basically says, "Don't wash my feet," right? And I'm pretty sure he's most likely saying that because he doesn't think he's worthy of having his feet washed by the Christ, right? And you know, for one, right, what I loved is that Jesus didn't rebuke him, right? You know, he says, those who have had a bath only need to wash their feet. Their whole body is clean. And so you are clean. And he did say not, except for the one person, right? What I find interesting is that even after all of that, he said, "Hey, listen, you call me teacher, and you call me Lord, and rightfully so. That's what I am, right? And I have washed your feet, and you should wash one another's feet." Now, I will fully admit that the first couple of readings, I kind of glossed over that whole thing, but then it hit me one day, and I was like, "Oh, dude, this is crazy." By nature of being on the vine, you are clean, right? Whenever you move around and you interact, when you do work, your hands and your feet, right, they'll get dirty. The things that you use to interact with the world with, right? And so the beautiful thing is that washing each other's feet and Christ being the one to basically wash your feet, right? Because remember, you don't have to atone for that sin that separates you from God anymore, right? However, through your repentance and asking for forgiveness, right, and doing your best to refrain from committing that, right, that is credited as righteousness, right? That is the feet washing that Christ is doing, right? And the most important one, I did get that part, but the washing each other's feet linked back to when Christ on the Sermon on the Mount instructed the person who has been offended to forgive the person who offended them. That's not a suggestion, right? He said that's what you should do, right? So it's not just a one-way street. It's a two-way street. Because by repenting and atoning for the sin that you commit against your brother and God, because every time you sin against a person, you sin against God, right? But now the other person has to forgive you, because if you don't forgive that person, your Lord is not going to forgive you, right? And so again, this is not a situation where we have a God. He comes, makes himself known, he gives a bunch of instructions and disappears, right? He gives proper examples of how we should be proper image bearers to each other, right? And a lot of that a lot of that requires being humble. And I'm not going to lie, being a Christian is very hard. And I say very hard in the sense that, like, well, depending on where your lifestyle and where you live, but if you live in a world where people aren't very caring or considerate, or, or people are like violent and stuff like that, right? It's very difficult to be that way, especially if you know internally that you have certain propensities for violence or not forgiving people and stuff like that. Those are the crosses that we have to bear, right? But guess what? Christ bared his cross while being a servant before he was glorified. And so if you want to be glorified in the same way he is being glorified, you have to bear your cross, right? And your cross is literally you essentially being an Israelite, struggling with man and God, and prevailing.
Or like Jacob wrestling with God.
Yep.
You're supposed to do that.
I was thinking about that. It's just again, it's just about enduring, and I can relate with you, Batman, when it comes to the environment thing, because when I was in my teenage years, and well, basically for all my youth, even though I'm in my mid-20s, I'm still in my youth age, but still, you guys know what I mean. When I was a minor, um, I I lived in a very rough ghetto, and basically doing like sometimes you couldn't even smile for too long, or they think you were like homosexual or something. So
I'm
we
straight.
both, yeah, oh dude, you don't even know that.
I
But
know exactly what you're talking about. I was born and raised in Kingston, Jamaica, in a ghetto. I know.
oh yep, I'm Caribbean raised too, so I think we got a connection here. So um it was quite hard to be even nice in that environment, because it was a rough and tough mentality. You'd have to take a lot of insults and a lot of fights. And the high school that I went to in particular was the first year of me going there. Apparently, some kid got stabbed in the ear with a scissor. So I mean, like, what, I don't know what the hell was going on, but it was just horrible. So me and my brother had to put on this mean mug face all the time and tried to act as tough as possible. Yes, Jamie, I'm not joking, but well, not as exaggerated as you're doing it, but um, we always had to put on this mean face and act all tough and stuff to just be able to fit in, basically. Because if you were an outlier in that environment, they treat you like garbage. So especially as a Christian, dude, like it is hard. It, especially for my brother, because my brother converted way before I did, and it was extremely hard for him to be a good Christian around those people, because they were just mercy God. It was hard, but moved to the DR and it was a lot less like that. Just to be honest with you, and yeah, it really does affect your walk when you're in certain environments, right? Either it be in some ghetto in the Caribbean, or some hood in the US, or some rough area in general in the US or anything. It's just, it really does affect your walk. And that's why sometimes whenever you see Christians fall, it tends to be because of the environment they're in. Like, I'm pretty sure if there was a town just filled with Christians, I'm pretty sure the rate of bad stuff happening would be pretty low. It would happen, but it'd be pretty low. So again, environment does impact your faith a lot.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I mean, people don't talk about this. You know, I'm talking about like the easy believism types, and I don't totally disregard some of what their point is, but I try to tell them, like, you know, think about just the way history went down. You know, 300 years ago, the gospel wasn't spread around the world like it is today, and people didn't know about the Bible, didn't know about Jesus like they do now. As messed up as it might be in certain areas, but you can't go into Africa and just say, just believe in a proposition. People were not living, I mean, and forget Africa. I mean, peasant Europe. Like, it's not just believe, just believe. That is a modern, rich, white, snobbery like thing. It's like that is not what the Bible's saying. That doesn't make sense for history, historically speaking, to uplift people out of the muck. It's not I'm not being racist. It's true with every ethnic group that to varying degrees at varying places at varying times. It doesn't make sense.
You saying that it's not racist makes it seems racist, Jamie. You're not helping yourself.
I'm saying, like, you can read Martin Luther talking about the peasants that were like sleeping around with each other, living in the street, had no ethical moorings, didn't care. And so it's like, dude, there's, you know, and you can talk that way about like tribes people in Africa. You can talk about the way about the culture and Hinduistic culture in India. You know, people have, I mean, the conservatives and the liberals have made a mess of what that really looks like. Oh, we shouldn't. Oh, you know, I like to tell this story, and I'm not sticking up for every aspect of theology of any particular group, but I'm saying, like, when the British went into India and they were largely Hindu and they were in charge, you know, rightfully or wrongfully, whatever, you know, they would, when a husband died in the Hindu religion, the wife would be, if her husband died, they would throw her on the funeral pyre alive and burn her to death with her husband that died. And the British admiral, who is probably some Calvinist idiot or, you know, whatever, it doesn't matter. But here's my point. They're a Christian ethic. They did try to let the people be free to do what they wanted to, you know, be their own people, but they also had missionaries. When a new admiral came in that worked for the British Navy, was in charge of a city, when they're occupying India or whatever, they told him about this leader in the city that died, and they're going to do a big funeral pyre in the center of town, and they're going to throw the wife in there. That was their culture. And so what he did is he said they can do what they want, but he had his men set up gallows in the town, all around the town square, and he said they're free to do what they want, but as long as I'm in charge of this town, if they burn that woman on her husband's funeral pyre, I will hang them in the middle of the town square. They didn't burn the woman. I think that was a good thing. So, look, there's ethics that go along with the Christian faith. Otherwise, it's a joke. It's a big joke.
Amber, I kind of want to hear your opinion on this, man.
Which thing do you want to hear my opinion about? Because I'm sure I probably have an opinion. I just don't know which one you want to hear about. Clarify that for me.
Well, it was mainly just about like how an environment can impact your walk as a Christian.
Oh, yeah, I think, boy, that's a big can of worms. I definitely think that. So okay, so when, give me a second. My brain is kind of turning here. Like, I always go back to the Old Testament just because that's what I love, and I'm eyeball deep in studying right now. So that's where I retreat to. And as you're looking at Israel, and they are on their way to the promised land, and even when they're supposed to, they get to the promised land, that doesn't work. They're sent into wandering for 40 years. And as they're, and taking the advantage, getting back to the promised land and actually going into the promised land, and God warns them over and over and over and over. They're supposed to be a light to the nations around them, to bring them in to relationship to God. But there's very strict warnings not to emulate or to live like the nations of the world, because it will taint their holiness and it will corrupt their very hearts and souls, which is exactly what happens over and over and over again. So that's what, the New Testament is so clear about. We're in the world, but we're not of the world, which goes back to Ezekiel 37. And we are, through the Spirit, the blood of Christ, we are moved from the carnal into the Spirit because of the blood of Jesus. But if we spend too much time emulating the world around us without those times of dwelling retreat with God in relationship, and with relationship with our brothers and sisters in community, which that should be, because I look at the church as not only a hospital, but a refuge. Our time when we go to our church or our parish, that's our chance to dwell together with other believers in relationship with God, that gives us a break from everything outside of it. So everything that we leave at the door, we get to just take our little dwelling break, and that refreshes us, that cleanses those earthly influences out of our minds, out of our hearts, and it gives us a restore once again for another week. So I think it's so important that we are the hands and feet, that we are out living among and being, reflecting the love and the character, and calling people to return to Christ, return to relationship with God, but doing so in a way that we continually come back to our own church, parish, tabernacle type place that gives us that retreat to reset and reattune ourselves, recenter our hearts fully on God, and have our brothers and sisters help us remember that when we worship together, so that we don't get our compasses misaligned. Because if you look at this really interesting, so a friend of mine sent this thing to me, and we were talking about this, that even if you're going to go on a trip and follow the equator around the globe, and if one of you has your compass set on a straight, true path to follow the equator, you're going east. So one of you has true east, but one of you is 1 degree off. You're not going to, at the beginning, you're not going to notice, but by the time you get to the full trip around the earth, the difference is one of you is going to wind up in the equator there in like Ecuador, and the other one's going to wind up somewhere in Texas. Like, you get so far apart just one step at a time when your compass is even just 1 degree off. And so we have to come back and recalibrate our compass, I think. So that was a very long-winded way to just say that, but yeah.
It's cool. Hey, do you guys mind?
I got a question.
I'm going to be gone for 2 minutes, so hold the fort for me.
Okay.
I'll be right back. Talk about whatever you want.
Hey, go ahead.
Talk
brother.
about his mustache.
Oh my gosh, he's still here.
He's still here.
I gotta go run it. I gotta put this snow blower away. It'll only take me a minute.
Nah, no problem.
All right, go ahead, bro.
So, growing up, I hated Christians. And I did not like Christians mainly because of their behavior. There's this see, I don't think people like fully understand what it means to be a wolf in sheep's clothing, right? because the behaving like a wolf and then turning around where you're covered looking like a sheep is a behavior that I experience a lot of my life. Yes, Jamaica is predominantly Christian. No, I'm not saying every Christian in Jamaica is bad. It's just that um, the majority of the ones that I interacted with, they were not very good people. Even their children turn out to be very vile people due to certain behaviors that they witnessed from their parents and um, and them being abused by their parents, right? And so my view on Christians and Christianity was not a very positive one, um, and the few people who I knew who were trying to be loving Christians eventually turned their back, mainly because of that environment, right? Some over the years have gone back to Christ, some haven't. But that environment, um, it it is the cross that you have to bear, right? In your walk, everyone has a cross, and the cross doesn't have to be necessarily in the form of suffering. It could be in the form of you showing restraint. If you have a lot of wealth and power and the ability to impose your rule and control over other people on a whim, right? It's very hard to humble yourself when you're looking down on everyone. And so this is why that particular situation where Jesus is washing his disciples' feet and making clear that the master isn't greater than the servant, right? In this situation, right? Your wealth and power doesn't make you any better than the people who you're looking down on from your tower. So that's a cross to bear as well, right? Certain political dispositions that might be antithetical to the teachings of Christ, that's a cross to bear. Some people don't know that. They don't see it that way, but it can be a cross. Because I've seen Christians who hold, as far as I'm concerned, very immoral beliefs in terms of how they should treat other people, right? Who's of a different disposition. And it's vile. That's their cross to bear. So the cross to bear doesn't necessarily come in the form of suffering all the time. It comes in many different forms. And when you're suffering and you're in a bad environment that is the world that tempts to do evil, right? Because of your suffering, it's easier for you to look at the things that it's easier for you to bear your cross in the sense that you know these things that are pushing you to do um, evil, for example, right? Like you're poor, you're starving, you want to steal, right? Because you're hungry, right? And no one will offer you any food, and you're just in a situation where you just you know, you got extorted or robbed or whatever, right? And so you have a situation like that, right? You it's easier for you to notice what the bad things are going to be if you do them, if it's already in your heart. But if you're not suffering through those things and you have all of your needs met and you're in a society that's relatively peaceful and you have more than enough and you have you have access, right? It's harder for you to not. It's harder for you to not notice the flaws in how you live, right? And so I think when people talk about bearing a cross, they should talk about the different types of cross that people have to bear. Ultimately, the cross it is a burden, right? But the burden, how it manifests, it's different for everyone. And so that's the beauty of Jesus Christ as a Lord and Savior and teacher, right? And that he addresses multiple different aspects and ways of living. If you're a person that loves money, whether you are rich or poor, right? He makes it clear, right? Cannot serve two masters. You would love one and you will hate the other. Cannot love money and love God, right? And so loving money, if that is your cross to bear, if that's the thing that is preventing you from from living a Christ-like life and having a good relationship with fellow image bearers, then you need to focus on correcting that aspect and bearing the weight of that cross to the best of your ability. And even if you get rid of that one, guess what? Another one's going to pop up, such as life. You know, um, but I think the cross bearing part is really important, and people's circumstance should be taken into consideration when we're having conversations with them about their walk in Christ. Because the truth of the matter is, if you can't relate to someone, right, it's very hard for you to instruct them properly on their walk, because they're going to look at your words as just kind of being honeyed words, right, without any relatability, and it just basically ends up not helping them.
Um, yeah, I agree. I literally saw Jamie's terrifying but handsome face appear. Yeah, he's blushing now.
Look at his face, he's red.
Yeah, he's all red and stuff. But yeah, I agree with you. I agree with you, man, and especially on the point of when you brought up yeah, Christians as well. Um, it's very important to also know that that cross bearing could happen within your own brotherhood. Um, I recall watching this one recent convert. He deconverted, by the way, but unfortunately, but um, his name is Young Don, and he had recently converted like 2 years ago, 2 years and like a couple months ago. And so he was a new convert. He pretty much closed down his YouTube channel, started a new one, started fresh Christian stuff, all good, everything. He unfortunately had an issue to where he would jump from doctrine to doctrine basically every month. And obviously, you need a good foundation within Christianity so that you can know how to manage yourself. So that was just a switch up here, another switch up there, here and there, and everywhere, right? So he moved from teacher to teacher as well. And the most of the teachers that he would have were not very nice, to put it simply. I saw one video where he was on a call with one of his former teachers, because he fell into some heresy at some point, and he ended up denying the divinity of Christ and the personhood of the Holy Spirit. And after he realized that it was biblical, he had a falling out with his teacher, and the teacher basically started to insult him, telling him that he's broke, and Where's his money? You know, basically trying to make him
Yeah,
feel
bro.
like a lesser like a lesser man than him, right? Even though, by the way, even though that's not true, the guy is literally was literally one of the biggest content creators on YouTube. But I'm gonna just leave it there. I'll just leave it at that. But he would have he insulted him, made him feel like trash, and and not only that, his doctrines were also pretty bad. Again, flat earther. He said the Bible dogmatically taught that the earth was flat, and many other weird doctrines that he held that also affected him to the point to where he basically denied Christianity as a whole. And now, right now, recent as of recent, the guy's an atheist, and it's unfortunate because you could tell he was someone that really wanted to find truth and follow God, but the environment in which he was in, and even worse, that it was an environment that was supposed to be a Christian environment, caused him to stumble. Now, I have faith that he'll come back. Obviously, I think he's just at a moment of rebellion, but it really does affect you with who you're trying to fellowship with, especially when you're in a Christian environment,
Oh
because
yeah,
that could be the Christians can make you feel even more deceived than the unbeliever, because you expect that from an unbeliever, but you don't expect that from your own
from
brother.
yeah, exactly. And
Yeah.
it's crazy because like I remember like still in Jamaica, like as a teenager, um, when I used to play um soccer and basketball for the team, and you had this one kid. They call them degenerates here, I guess. But he was a criminal through and through. He'd killed people and brought guns to school and stuff like that. For there was there's this one kid on the school team. He was a Christian. Um, and one day that same delinquent kid came and he pretty much robbed everyone and then asked to play basketball with us, and we were like, what? And yeah, that
He sounds
Christian
like
kid
an
said yeah.
upstanding Christian boy. He sounds like he definitely wouldn't do bad stuff to people. That's a very nice guy.
Nah, the Christian dude wasn't the one that robbed us.
I'm being sarcastic. I'm being sarcastic.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, the Christian kid, he said, yeah, come play ball. And you
Hmm.
know what? Tomorrow, you know, if you want lunch, I'll buy you lunch too. And I was so confused. Like, why would he just robbed you? Why would you want to buy him lunch? Right?
Hmm.
Um, and the kid, he did just that, right? And it turns out that eventually that kid started to go to classes.
Hmm.
We played with him after practice, helped him with homework and stuff like that. And like he actually like it turns out to be like really, really good at math. He eventually started considering going to church, and he struggled with that because again, the environment that he's in,
Yep.
right? Um, you know, uh, he started to clean up his life. He got away from his mom because there was an abuse situation. Um, but later, like a couple of years after that, after we all graduated and lived real life, we like I heard news that like some police saw him and shot him like 20 something times
That
because
was not the outcome that I was waiting for.
yeah, uh, apparently he killed police and he was wanted. There's like a silent wanted list for some criminals
Hmm.
where they won't take you in. He apparently was one of them ever since he was a teenager. And that made me incredibly sad because he tried to carry his cross and clean up his life and be a Christian. I hope that he got saved. Um, you know, but that's the environment that I used to live in, right?
That's
And he
so
got
sad,
caught
man.
up having a normal job, not robbing anyone, right? Going to work, and a cop who was familiar with him, a couple cops who were familiar with him, saw him and lit him up.
That's
'Cause
that's insane, and that's basically a death sentence in most Caribbean countries. They put you
yeah,
on a wanted list. That's the kill on sight. That's pretty much kill on sight. Oh
yep,
man, that's so sad. Maybe they would have had second thoughts if they knew that he was trying to turn his life around. What am I talking about? They still would have shot him anyways.
yeah. They most likely would have shot him anyways.
But I hope he did get saved because that is just sad. And hey, that's to show you a little bit of kindness as a Christian can go a very long way.
Yeah, because he actually was trying. Like, we were surprised to see how good this kid was at math, but he never went to class. Like, what, 2 years in school we've known him, and he barely went to class. And like, for him to change his life, that was really nice. And to be honest with you, right, it was another Christian woman who showed me and my younger brothers, who had nothing, who was suffering, grace. She didn't preach to us. She didn't show off her righteousness and how holy she was. She just helped us. She didn't invite me to go to church. Not that I would have the time, considering circumstances. All she did was ask me to read my Bible when my life settled down. Just keep that promise, and that's what I did. And here I am now. So it's that grace component is really, really important to me, right? Because there's nothing I did for her to decide to come and help a bunch of kids by themselves in a house, right? I didn't have any, I offered to do some work for her. She said no. Right? Yeah, I gotta talk. I gotta talk in your tongues, bro.
He wants you
You know,
to speak with a little more patois. That's what he
yeah,
wants.
right.
Yeah.
But yeah, man. There's nothing I did. It was just her being graceful, and that's all it took. That left such an impact for me that after years, father died, grieved my dad, um, issues in school, athletics, and all sorts of stuff. Like, once my life settled down, and I'll be fair, the Bible was the last book I decided to read earnestly, but it turns out to be the one that gave me the truth. So
Amen to
that
that.
grace part is really, really important. That woman bared some fruits, man, and them fruits left some seeds. And I don't know, man, that I'm sounding like a workstationist right now, but
The question is, was her message worksy? No, it wasn't.
I'm keeping a buck. She didn't even give me a verbal message. It
She's
was
like,
her
don't
first.
even do works. Amber, you could learn a thing. You're so worksy, Amber. Amber goes around blessing all the heretics because she's so nice.
Right.
The option is not very charitable, and I think that I have had more fun and made more friends and learned much more with grace and charity than I have with a clenched fist.
That is very true. Sometimes you can't even have a conversation with certain particular people, which I will not mention certain names on YouTube because I don't want to have any controversies with past stuff that has happened. But
Don't set Jamie off.
But it once you have a nice formal conversation with the spirit of love between brothers, regardless of disagreements, you tend to always have a very good conversation. But the moment you try to try to put an iron fist down and immediately try to call each other heretics here and there and everywhere, it's like, how are we even going to get to like the meat and potatoes of it if you're just immediately calling me a heretic, or you're insulting a loved one of mine, or you call me a dog, or whatever it may be? Like you're not gonna get anywhere with that, man.
And listen, my brother has been uh decided to baptize me with those titles like what 3 times recently. You know, he used the H word. He called me a pig, dog, female one. You know, all sorts of names. But you know, I still love him. I still
Yeah,
think he's saved.
he
Um,
just needs to work out the kinks.
yeah, you
This
know,
is basic.
you got to
Probably
know
people
his
be. I
cross.
think people get that way when they're scared.
Yeah,
A lot of
because
times,
he
because
was
that's what
like that
happened.
because of eternal conscious torment argument where he couldn't support what he was saying, and he got extremely angry, right? So it's just one of those, and it wasn't like I was trying to shame him or like make him look bad or anything like that. We're just having a conversation like we're having now, and for whatever reason he started to manifest, you know. And I'm not saying that as a pejorative. I'm saying that because it's the behavior that I witnessed,
And
right?
that's why I said earlier that doctrine as well can cause your can cause you to stumble with the cross that you're trying to carry as well. Because
Oh yeah, but you got to realize you're carrying a cross in the first place. If you're being a Christian and you think that you're not carrying a cross, or you're so righteous that you don't have a cross to bear, then I don't know, man, something ain't right. I think if I were to, by some miracle, even this is definitely not my calling, like become like the elder or preacher of a church, I am going to set aside at least 20 minutes for my congregation, for quiet, for everyone to pray and ask for forgiveness to Jesus Christ. I ain't going to pray for you. You got your own mouth, you got your own brain. You can pray for yourself and have a conversation with your Lord. If you have a cross that you are struggling to carry, still pray, but go ahead. Talk to the deacon. You can talk to me, right? Talk to people. Ask for help, right? And when I say ask for help, don't let your pride get in the way. If you're broke and, you know, being broke is making it difficult for you to live, and it, makes it hard for you to carry your cross, like totally, man, ask for help, right? If you ask for money, somebody might hook you up. But if it's a situation where you need more, well, maybe asking for a different job, right? Pray for it. Pray and work towards it. Pray and work towards it. Because that's, again, it's the real life struggles that really what affects a lot of people's, you know, walk with Christ. It's not intellectual. It's not, half the time it's not even the way how other Christians, you know, treat them. It's literally just their environment. And we just need to be more, you know, at least try to be more charitable in terms of um, how we interact with our brothers and sisters. Yeah, absolutely, Terry. They can intercede, but it's a personal relationship. You gotta want it too. Because if you don't want forgiveness, if you don't atone, right? If it's not something you want for yourself, you're not gonna get it. Right? This is we are not in the Old Testament where you need some earthly priest to go and do sacrifices and go to God for you, right? To ask for your forgiveness, right? That curse is broken. You can go to God directly to yourself. Part of the reason he came down and took on flesh is to make himself more relatable to you, right? A dog is not relatable to you. A cat isn't relatable to you. How can a God be relatable to you? But a man God, that's different.
Yeah. Again, I'd have to agree with you. I
Hey,
don't really
you
have
can't
much.
say that about cats, man.
What, I don't.
My
I
cat
don't.
relates to me. How dare you?
I love
Terry,
cats.
can I
I
get
have
away?
two kitties now, and they're very cute. And I fed them too much, and now they're chubby.
Shannon. Sorry,
His
yeah.
cat probably has a mustache.
My cat is a woman. Thank you very much. And Shannon and Terry are going to back me up on this.
Okay.
Oh my god, they know the cat lineage. I bet he still has
We
his
cat
cat
people
tail.
around here. Right? We cat people. That's all. It's got to
Well,
hold me
my
down.
cats will grow up to be stronger and better than your cats. So, yeah. And also, my cats are multicolored, and yours is just gray and boring.
No, that's black and white. My cat is beautiful. A coat of many colors, in fact. I have a ginger cat named Ginger, and I have a calico named Kubota. Thank you very much. You're
I'm sorry.
forgiven, my son.
Okay, it's okay. It's all right. I'm sorry for Oh, my cat, Shannon. My cat is what's I forgot her. I forgot her name. Oh, we called.
Sure,
Wait.
Terry. Terry.
It's
I'm sorry, Terry. Cat
cat
gay.
gang. Well,
I
the white
apologize.
one is white with brown spots on her head and a little bit of black on her forehead. And the the bigger one, which is the boy, his name is Album in it's a Latin name for like something I don't remember. It's my brother. My brother named the cat. I don't know what it even means, but it's a Latin name for something. And he's like white with gray and black spots. Like he's a weird looking cat, but he's beautiful, and he's also very shy. But I love them, and they're my babies, and they're fat now because I overfed them.
Amber, do you have a cat?
I do not. I have a corgi.
Boring.
I was gonna say Jamie's about to call me not saved because I don't have a cat. I have a dog.
Exactly.
You need a mandatory cat in your house now.
I had a cat for gosh, we had that cat for like 16 years.
16?
And yes, we
I've
had
never
that
heard a
cat
cat
for like
live that long.
16 years. And
Oh, the Pope is here.
by the time we by the time that cat we had to put it down.
Wait.
That
Amber,
cat-
Amber.
Yes.
Reverence.
Boss does not show reverence or deference to me.
Oh, I was trying to respect you, man.
No, you have to respect me, but she doesn't. That's the boss we're all talking to. What's good, Kyan? You good, man?
I am doing pretty fine, brother.
So finish your story, Amber. I'm down. I'm on the
That
edge of my seat.
that cat was I am convinced that cat was demon possessed, and I will never have another cat again because that cat was so horrible.
Jamie's a cat girl to the heart. We all know this.
Yeah. But I have lived experience traumatic like damage forever from cats, and so I will not have another cat.
Oh, we're sorry. We apologize on behalf of all cats.
The American Baptist Pope is here. What do you have? Do you have words for us, sir?
Brush your hair.
It's brushed. I just washed it.
You look greasy.
I was
Really?
literally gonna say
Oh my god.
I used tea tree shampoo and then coconut conditioner.
Yeah, you look greasy. Mm-mm.
He looks manly.
I went
You
outside.
get manly with seven L's.
I'm busy manning it up with the snowblower while you're drinking martinis on a whatever you call it.
I've actually
Whatever you
never
call
had
it
a
when you-
martini. I'm not a fan.
drinking mead and laying out in the sun, getting a suntan probably.
Yeah. You wish you could make your own booze.
He's actively looking at that one burnt tree behind his house.
Yeah, really.
Yeah.
So,
I got 8
Your
inches of
Eminence.
snow, man.
Your
That's
Eminence
average.
Pope Nick, the Baptist Pope Nick, what are your thoughts on people, our Christian brothers and sisters and cats bearing their cross and the different types of cross that people bear in their walk with Jesus Christ?
I don't understand the question, but it could be because I've had a very long day. I do not like. What are you asking? I'm sorry.
Okay, so we were before you came in, we were kind of talking about the environments that a lot of Christians are in, and how those environments can affect their walk with Christ. And so that's essentially the cross that they have to bear, basically, right? Them being a product of their environment.
Hmm.
And what I was kind of saying is, typically when people hear about bearing a cross, they think of it in the form of suffering, right? Or some form of suffering. And I was saying that that's not always the case. It could just be, a really wealthy guy that loves money, right? And his cross to bear is to get rid of that love for money, um, and focusing on his relationship with Christ, just as an example.
Yeah, I can see that. My sense of it is, I mean, suffering can be real, it can be imaginary, it can be earned, it can be inflicted. You know, suffering can be a lot of things. It's, you know, I think bearing your cross needn't necessarily be about. I mean, to I mean, we would use the language of suffering for Christ or whatever, right? We're comfortable with that sort of language. But I think bearing your cross, um, yeah, I mean, I suppose I wouldn't object to that, but I can kind of see what you're saying, not knowing the entire conversation or anything of the details.
Yeah, I kind of shared a situation when I was a teenager where there's a really bad kid who a kid on our basketball team who was a Christian influenced that other kid by being kind to us. First, the kid basically robbed us. Christian kid said, "Hey, I'll buy you lunch tomorrow if you want to hang out." And eventually, the delinquent kid um, started to clean his act up, come to class, all of that stuff, and started to go into church, um, up to the point where we graduated. And after a couple of years after we graduated, I learned that he basically got shot like 20 times because he was a cop killer. And In the Caribbean, when you are a cop killer, they don't take you to jail. They take you to the grave.
Right.
Yeah. So it was, his burden was a criminal life that he struggled a lot with, basically, and like not having much of anything, like most kids back then. Um, you know, those I was just kind of referring to the things that people struggle with, basically. Um, and I'm not saying that it's just the environment, like you said. Sometimes it's imaginary. Sometimes people can make stuff up and put themselves into certain situations. But I just wanted to kind of dispel the idea that it always comes in a form of suffering. Like if you have a good life and you are a person with a lot of power and influence, right? That power and influence can, it can cause you to struggle in your relationship with Christ because you might have a propensity to want to abuse that power and influence, for example, right? Um,
Well, you can
where
actually see that, and
yeah,
not to interrupt, please, but it was, my church, ironically, is in a fairly, for California, a fairly affluent area. The area around it, you've got a lot of poverty and a lot of, well, 20 years ago it would have been middle class housing, all that sort of stuff. Um, but ironically, most of the people that attend my church are, many of them are retired or retiring age, but they're not, they're well off, but they're not, they're not wealthy, in any sense. And even I'd say about half the churches, they live in Carson or Wilmington or the surrounding areas. But a lot of the people that attend my church and serve at my church can't afford to live in the area where the church is, you know. And we're in a kind of area where there's kind of a subdivision because, the church was built in the 50s, and a lot of churches in the 50s were built in suburbs, and like housing tracts and stuff like that. And we sent out and big houses, well, in California, they're like $3 million homes, but, on, what are they called? That house picked up and put in Texas, that's a $300,000 house, you know what I mean? Or someplace like that. And so the area
Probably
is very
500.
wealthy. Yeah, very wealthy, very this, very that. And we sent out to every single house. We sent from our church. My office boss and I created a flyer, basically. Hey, come. We're the church you can walk to. Come join us on Sunday. You know what I mean? Just come join us. And it's a fairly conservative area for at least for LA County. And not not a nibble, not a comment, not an email, no one came. And so it's one of those where we kind of assessed, and it may just be that this area is so wealthy and privileged, they don't think they need to come to church. And like you said, their cross to bear is something they live in, they don't have to live paycheck to paycheck. They don't need family, they don't need community. They can just buy stuff. And it's just one of those where I'm like, yeah, there may just be that heightened sense of privilege. And I mean that in the actual sense of the term, not like, privilege as a woke term or an anti woke term or whatever, but just that sense of, you know, this person doesn't have to go to bed hungry. This person may never know what it's like to actually go to bed hungry. I know that feeling quite
We
very,
call we
very
call
well.
that Laodicea.
Yeah. We call that worship on Sunday. But yeah.
I mean, like tired, rich, and hungry, and in need of nothing. But they
Oh
don't.
yeah, I know. And so it's just, you can see, the burden or the cross they bear is just, well, multiple commas in a bank account and affluence, and they've bought their way out of suffering. And it's like, well, yes, you may have done that, but you've also, in some sense, bought yourself out of meaning and joy.
yep.
And at that point, I'm like, all the money in the world ain't going to go with you. There ain't no 401k stored up in heaven, at least in terms of money. So
There are rooms.
there are rooms and all that sort of stuff, but I don't see a lot of
Yeah,
Teslas in heaven. I don't see a lot of this or that in heaven.
yeah. And listen, I'm not of the mindset that just because someone is doing well off, whether they've inherited their life or earned it. It doesn't really matter to me. But I think one of the things that people should consider, or at least people should consider talking about in church, is addressing the different types of crosses that people bear, and it's not just the one that comes with suffering.
Mhm.
It's the one that comes without, you know, without suffering, right? The one that comes with complacency, the one that comes with, you know, um, gluttony and power and just really not even caring about people.
Hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
those are legitimate crosses, um, in my humble opinion. I think there's a reason Jesus told a rich dude to leave all his stuff, come follow him. There's a reason Jesus said, you know, you can't serve two masters, can't love money, and you can't love me, right?
Hmm.
Um, you know, there's a reason he said that. Unfortunately, I don't really see it get talked about a lot. Interestingly, in church services again, but maybe that's just me.
Hey, Jamie, did you listen to my sermon on Revelation 20? Lavish me with praise of how amazing it was. It was a very mid sermon, but yeah, got to preach on Revelation 20. That was fun, and I'm glad I'll probably never have to do that again.
Can you post it in chat?
Nope,
It's in
you
my
shouldn't
it's on my
listen. Don't.
it's on my community page.
Oh,
No, it was good. You totally. I could tell you're really careful. Let's just say you preach the like you claim to about it, which is good. Like the ethical point of it, without you like I could tell you carefully did not say anything that demanded a particular view or timeline of the you know what I mean. You like
oh yeah, yeah.
you avoided that perfectly in such a way where someone who has whichever view ought to appreciate the point that's enduring about it for all times. So that's what I thought was good. That's
Yeah,
what to me.
well,
Like
that's cool.
and obviously the reality is, without being too overbearing, you're like talking about the ultimate victory of God that's in view. Like, and you like kind of did it in a way that allowed for someone to have either view, but with the kind of like I would say demands the right understanding of God's victory. But someone could listen to it and be a twerp about that and not realize it. But it was easy access in that sense of someone with varying views to, and so I thought that was quite smart.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I the joke I told Jamie, and I don't know if I said here, is I study Revelation like a partial preterist, and I preach it like an idealist. And I look at the other two views, I'm like, yeah, those are fine. I got nothing against them. They just don't seem to arise naturally out of Revelation. Doesn't mean they're wrong. Um, but yeah, the more I looked at the 1,000-year reign, I'm like, yeah, this is the debate on this is a smokescreen. Like it doesn't actually get you anywhere, and it doesn't make you. I'm like, it's an for what John's trying to do. It's such an ethically empty way of reading Revelation that I was like, it makes great sense to me that why a lot of evangelicals will fixate on that when Paul tells people elsewhere, basically, they're consumed with dates and numbers and this and this and this and this, and I'm like, well, it's not that time is irrelevant, but what's the point of the image? Like, what does John want to happen? It's like, I mean, John's a theologian and he's writing to a bunch of beleaguered people who are threatened with apostasy, idolatry, and political oppression and violence and all that sort of stuff. So I'm just kind of like, yeah, the 1,000-year reign is not going to mean a lot to people who have a knee in their back and a boot on their head and a sword in their gut. So maybe we shouldn't care
Yeah,
more about that than John does.
I like that.
I
Like
think the main focal point should always just be the kingdom. Like the 1,000-year reign obviously is cool, and I believe that you should have a right interpretation, because even though it's secondary, it's always good to have the right interpretation of it. But the main focal point should always be just the kingdom, the new kingdom, the new kingdom. That should always be the focal point. That is one of the major aspects of the gospel is the preaching of the kingdom, and also obviously soteriology as well. But one of the major thing is the new kingdom. I think that's
Well, is what was good about the sermon is that I can actually literally say, I can actually encourage Adventists to listen to it because you can lose focus on what the point is, even though Adventists have a strong message in getting that part of it right. But those things that he's talking about can often get lost in the weeds where we end up being like once saved, always saved, obsessive people, and that we don't preach the Christian ethic and the enduring application to believers and the hope in that and what we're looking forward to, but not just in the sense of something we're just sitting here on our butts waiting for, but what the call to action as representatives of Christ and looking forward to that, knowing that the victory is already but not yet sort of thing. And so I can honestly say, go listen to his sermon. It's really good. And that would work for multiple views of people that actually care about things like holiness and, walking after the way of Christ. So go watch it. I posted it on my community page. I recommend it, even though he's a Baptist and he's not saved. He might one day become.
So. I was watching the video and I got jealous of his beard because his beard is longer than mine.
Yeah, and I was trimming it up and I missed a spot and I went back and turns out I cut a chunk out of it. And I'm like, well, time to go back to. I didn't pull an Arthur over an apology and just shave it down to baby butt smooth skin, but I took it. I'm like, all right, well, I got to go to like a week's worth. Shaved it all off and kind of just decided to start over. But the worst part is all the white is still there even at that. So it almost looks like in the video, I started laughing when I was watching because it looked like I had shaved a massive chunk out of my beard and it was insanely uneven. But it's all white. That whole entire section, like a massive part of my left jaw, like just under that, just under my left jawline is just a massive white spot in the beard. And then I got stuff in the temples.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Jamie, I don't. Jamie, you just have a mustache. Okay, calm
down. I know, but when mine comes in, like the white patch, that it will look like it's like a spot that I'd missed when it's short, when it starts to come back. And I know exactly what he's talking about.
Yep, and it's just one of those you kind of just chuckle and it's like, well, I mean,
you can't really do anything about it.
Oh, I mean, I could dye it. I could dye it, but I don't know. In my mind, it's like God gave me these white hairs and dang it, I've been stressed in ministry. I've gone through plenty of traumatic things in my life. I've earned these, so I'm going to keep them.
What he's basically saying is that he's old.
Old and not as wise as I should be. After all, I'm hanging out with Jamie.
Well, I'm jealous because you have a son. I'm just got out of the game now, and that's freaking me out. Amber,
well, just go to an American Baptist church. There's plenty of girls in American Baptist churches.
Yeah. Well,
boss.
Maybe. Boss, get in here. If you want to play with the big boys, you got to butt in once in a while.
No, boss is sitting there just thinking about Hebrew and Phil and Nipthel and all that sort of stuff. She's thinking about why Jesus is actually within Genesis 3:15 textually and all that fun stuff. Woof.
You can't read Jesus into the Old Testament.
I mean, he wrote it, but he didn't retcon it for himself.
Yeah, it definitely doesn't. It definitely makes sense that Jehovah sent fire down from Jehovah in heaven. It's like it's not him. It's just God because he's super cool.
I think the issue is I think the problem with Isaiah is you've got this historical stuff, and at the end of the day, theology doesn't matter because all that matters about the book of Isaiah is pure history, whether or not these things happen. If you read it prophetically, in the sense of everything being about a prediction of the end times, then I think Isaiah actually becomes meaningful. But then, you have to read Leviticus, and who wants to do that? Just a bunch of people begetting this and all these rules and rituals that don't mean anything because Jesus overcame them and threw them in the dumpster when he came here. So, thank God for Jesus getting rid of the Old Testament. We can finally decouple ourselves from that that so-called love letter that people say when it's basically just a list of do's and don'ts. It's just so much fun.
I think
And Amber's seething right now, so just
I
a
love
heads
it.
up.
boy.
I'm going, yes, yes.
She called us
Obviously,
a
I'm
bunch of
kidding.
schoolgirls, by the way. She insulted us.
Jesus plagiarized the Old Testament, by the way. Didn't even give.
I mean,
Didn't even
he's
give.
allowed to retcon it if he wrote it and plagiarize it. You know, that's totally cool, but you know, he should at least tell people that's what he's doing. At least tell the historical critical scholars that's what he's doing.
He did say, but I say on a few things.
But I say this is what you were supposed to do in the first place, you idiots. But you've been hearing from these burnt nuts that, you know.
I mean, I think Jesus was personally sacrificed from the foundation of the world, as the Calvinist says. And we just are in this weird little time loop where Jesus was sacrificed at the beginning of creation, like Karl Barth and all that sort of stuff. So, from the foundation of the world means Jesus' blood is literally woven into the earth. So, we've all got a little bit of Christ consciousness in us. Thanks, Old Testament.
That's very true, and it was preordained from eternity past.
Yep. And so, whenever we are cannibals, technically, if the Catholics are right, we are participating in the Eucharist.
So you're saying that right now, for every time, because if Jesus is the high priest and he's also the lamb that's supposed to be sacrificed for atonement, every time he forgives someone's sin, he sacrificed himself and
And if we
atoned
eat that and it becomes his body and his blood and that stays in us, and let's say, you know, okay, I'm going to get weird. I go and French my wife and, you know, all that sort of stuff. You get into all sorts of
What are those?
Frenching is just making out. But, you know, if we're talking DNA in the body of Christ and all this sort of stuff, you know, like just saying, like this Augustinianism, anthropology, and transmission of sin, if you know what I'm saying, suddenly becomes a lot more palpable. So there you go.
So wait, that's why. Wait, it all makes sense now.
And that is why
So-
we say in memory of him, not literally the real presence, because that gets real funky real fast.
Wait, well,
Thanks,
wouldn't that mean
Leviticus.
that we would be eating lamb chops because he is the lamb technically, right?
Yeah, and he's the one who you know, he thank God, you know, he did all of this sort of stuff because at the end of it, you know, the lamb sacrifice was because we sinned and God needed a pound of actual lamb flesh and a quart of lamb blood in order to be satiated because God is infinitely wrathful and love is just this thing that, you know, what a bunch of sissy stuff, you know, I mean,
You.
just this like pride flags. God's not, you know, it's all this pride flag sissy stuff. And you know, Leviticus is just all about pride and all that. It's like, no. This is just lame. I mean, at the end
Amber
of the
stole
day,
my line.
yeah, exactly. So it's like, I don't know. I think God, you know, just at the end of the day wants sacrifice because he likes watching things suffer, and he finds it very funny that all these, you know, talking monkeys down here are just banging rocks together, going ooga booga. Moses wrote this. When, of course, as Boss knows, Moses wrote every single word of the Pentateuch. Every single, even the part about him being the most humble man who ever lived.
Someone's gonna watch this randomly and think we're a bunch of idiots.
I mean, I just play one, you know, on Saturdays. So
I think that
I
was
know
a
what
jab
you
at
did,
us.
sir.
It was a jab at us. This little Sunday Pope.
You're
I
not
make fun.
slipping
Here's the rule: if I make the joke, I can take the joke. I'm all good with it.
Exactly.
Well, it is some good literature considering they were goat herders. I know that.
I mean, they were also ethnically pure too, so there's that aspect. So all those white supremacists on Twitter,
White and delightsome, you mean?
yeah, exactly. Yes, you know, there you go.
So Amber, what's your opinion on this interesting topic? It was very deep and profound.
Yeah, we solved the issue of the proto-evangelium of Genesis, and we gave the white supremacists on Twitter is just we give them everything they need to start their own cult.
Beautiful.
You do have to. By the way, Amber,
I'm
wait.
gonna rebuke
Yeah,
us, bro.
Boss
me-
is
let me tell you
basically
something.
dying right now.
Let me speak ex cathedra for a moment.
You're not
You-
allowed. You're as the Pope. You're not allowed. You have to. You can speak. We call it Saturday talk. You can do Saturday talk.
Okay, the Pope of Sabbath would like to say something. and I mean this, you do have to eat Jesus. You just have to eat. You have to
Wait,
eat the
eat
you
or yeet? Because I was just gonna say, if you yeet Jesus, that'd be a real cool way of serving communion. Just like the baseball game, you just load up one of them shotguns full of the body and the blood and just
like the
fire it
makeup.
into the crowd. All right, everyone, here it comes! Blam! Yeah, I mean, that's how they actually killed the lambs in the Old Testament. They didn't rest their hands on it, slit its throat. They shot it with a
Shotgun.
Eucharistic shotgun.
Like when Homer invents the instant makeup shotgun.
Exactly. And that's the most kosher way to do it. Metal's kosher. Stainless steel, yo. Blam.
Doesn't rust. So
That's true.
but I like to say this, and I guess this confuses people. And I'm just like, obviously, Nick, I have the same view I think you do about all that. But I just say, when people start talking about Jesus, why don't you just take Jesus' words literally? You have to eat him. And I go, yeah, but we have to eat a living Jesus. Like, you do have to eat Jesus. He's alive. It's a living thing. And people, I guess, don't get what I'm saying.
People get
Jesus
weird with
is
selective
different, man,
literalism.
spiritually speaking.
Say again. To me, it makes perfect sense. I'm just, Jesus said this, and all the typology about what God said to do, what love is, what Jesus did for us, what Jesus said, how he relates that to the commands of God and the love of God and the character of Jesus, the incarnation. And so I'm just like, yeah, you do have to eat Jesus. But I don't mean transubstantiation, and I don't mean getting communion at the right church or wrong church. I mean, you're supposed to, for me, live on the teaching of Jesus and be transformed by the Holy Spirit in doing so. And that's our lifeblood. And it's an active, ongoing relational thing between us and God, and through communion with the saints, and through prayer, and through the commands of God as listed in the text that we've been granted to have. And I don't understand how any Christian would disagree with that if they know God. That's what I think.
I mean, the most literal parts of what Jesus says are the parts that are really difficult. And then as soon as Jesus uses a metaphor or a simile or a parable, we go, and we read it like a car manual. And it's like, you guys, y'all, like, if Jesus wants you to truly know something, he tells you. It's like John the Seer in Revelation. If he wants you to understand what he's actually getting at, he tells you what it is. The lake of fire is the second death. The seven lampstands are the seven spirits or the seven churches. I forget the exact analogy, but y'all know what I mean. Like, this is this. And it's like when
The
Jesus
incense
says,
is the prayers of the saints.
yep, exactly. And so you begin to see all this sort of stuff. It's like, the hardest part of reading the Bible is just reading it and just being like, oh, well, this is what Jesus wants you to do. Be perfect as my heavenly Father is perfect suddenly becomes well, that's just a nice suggestion because we can actually do that. And I'm like, I don't know about you, but that takes some serious stones to tell Jesus, yeah, you did it, but I'm not going to do it because I can't do it, even though you told me to do it. It's like, yeah, you see how far that goes. See, read Matthew 25 and see what people say when we followed you, and basically Jesus is like, yeah, nope.
That's one of the clearest commands that Jesus ever gave. I don't understand why you wouldn't do that. And why, Amber? Why'd you go from? Okay, we're all just doing it now. I'll just give
I
you a
like
second.
the picture Amber did of me. I like, it's like hobo Jesus. That Caesar guy who's the fake white Jesus. I'm gonna use that one. Wait, Amber was trying to say something a long time ago, and I interrupted her because I'm a sexist monster, and so I want to give Warren McGrew a chance to speak. Go ahead, Warren.
Yeah, only because men are allowed to speak here.
She
So
kind of saved herself with that
well,
picture.
here's the thing. Not to interrupt you, boss, but you'll find this funny. Basically, what we have here is not biblical theology where a woman speaks of her own prophetic power and agency as God would have it be so. But we have the Gospel of Thomas, where you have Jesus literally, saying this. And Gospel of Thomas, for those who don't know, is basically secular fanfic of what Jesus might have said if a Gnostic liked Jesus and wrote about him, where basically Jesus says Mary Magdalene can go to heaven if she becomes a woman or becomes a man. So as of right now, we have this literally going on. So boss is boss, and boss must speak because there we go. That makes more sense. The Pope has spoken. The boss must speak. Seriously, I can't get a word in edgewise. Well, I mean, if you weren't just being quiet when we were educating people on the Old Testament, Leviticus, I mean, come on, boss.
Man up already.
No one say anything. Just
I
be quiet.
literally can't talk. I am laughing so hard. It's like, oh, you guys are amazing. You have a couple of you have an idea, but you guys have you have no idea how badly I needed to laugh that hard. It I really did. That was a whole bunch of all my favorite epic nonsense all right in a row. And that was just so perfect. Oh my goodness. I don't even know where to start. So I probably just won't.
Hey, boss, may I ask you
Yeah.
a Hebrew question?
Yes.
All right. So I'm of the opinion that, for those who don't know, Tashuka, and I'm probably butchering that because I'm going off memory, but as commonly translated,
Sheka.
desire in
Uh-huh.
Genesis 3:15.
Okay.
Your I'm just going to say desire. Your desire shall be for your husband, but he shall rule over you. I'm of the
Right.
opinion, based on an article I read recently, but a long time ago, that the word there doesn't refer to desire per se, but
Mhm.
means the sense of return. And there was an article published in the Journal of Biblical Literature on that
Mhm.
looks at the Dead Sea Scrolls and the way they use that term. And the author, I think it's Joe Lore, I think is how you say it. Anyway, but he makes that case based on the Dead Sea Scrolls that it means to return to something. Do you think that makes better sense of that passage? And it's not, as you and I both know, it's not a curse passage. But does that make sense of God's kind of assessment of the situation that Eve will return to her husband, but instead of it being a relationship predicated in Eden, it is a relationship now, well, looking like all that nasty stuff that we see in the world. What are your thoughts?
I think that um because that word is more like a Hallett and BDB really I'm just looking at that just a second. Like I think this is more an idea that there is a longing to return because there's a break in the relationship because sin has created a break in the relationship between Yahweh and Adam and Eve that creates a vacuum, that creates a longing, and that longing turns into because of that break of the because of that break with the one who is supposed to be the the sovereign, the authority, the one that's higher, that when Adam and Eve choose to pursue themselves, to put themselves at least equal with God, and that breaks that chain there, that creates this power vacuum. And so I think that word, that longing word there, is more of a wrestling to fill that power vacuum. And so that is a back and forth cycle of trying to use the other one, Adam and Eve trying to use each other to fill that power vacuum, but by also exerting that power vacuum over each other. So you get into a cyclical loop of wrestling for control. And I think that is in that passage manifested differently. So instead of saying that she will sexually desire him and he will, dominate her, that is the way that longing loop plays out for women. Their way to have power in that dynamic is through that sexual expression, and for men that way to engage in that power vacuum dynamic is through power, dominance, and oppression. And so I think that longing is more of an idea of a fulfilling, wanting to fill an emptiness that turns into a cycle of self-perpetuating or perpetuating dominance over each other in the way, but that it's expressed differently, if that makes any sense.
That makes a lot of sense, and you actually see that ironically, you see that fracturing happen in earlier in the chapter when you've got
Mhm.
Adam blaming God. Not he doesn't even blame Eve. He
Yeah.
blames God for giving him Eve, which is, like I don't know about you, but I don't ever recall screaming at my dad for giving me something that I wanted. Then when it didn't do the thing I wanted, I blamed him for it rather than I'm the one who broke it, so to speak. And so, like, you can see that relational fracturing or that fissure right there. And just the fact that Adam blames God for you gave me her. It's like, dude, like she's not a robot. Like y'all did this. And I don't
Mhm.
know, it's interesting that they're both culpable for their actions in a way that is tragic, I suppose, in its own way. And I don't
Yeah,
know.
but
Mhm.
remember, like, there's a reason. There's a reason. Um, there is scripture telling husbands they should love their wives, and it tells them how they should love their wives, and that love being reflective of the same way Christ loves the church. And if you don't know how to love, right, there's instructions on how to love. It explains what love is as well.
I want to know what love is.
I think there's a difference between. I think that there would be more of an understanding of the Hebrew way to understand that word than this this side of our modern understanding of gender and power dynamics and our tendency to read into the way that that is understood. And I think there's a lot of damage that, like, especially like things like historical critical and our imposing an understanding, trying to reconstruct history with our own lens on it, has skewed a lot of the ways that we read some of that stuff. I just, yes, they're supposed to be, but if you think about that, a lot of people like to use that passage in a way that means, husbands, step up over and in a way, use in as a form of even a passive aggressive control, and that women have to just accept that in submission because of and that's not the dynamic that Hebrew is creating there. I think that it just because Jesus didn't. I'm having trouble, and Rev, maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but
I would
I
never
don't
do so.
see. Well, I would hope so. If I'm wrong, I should be corrected. But
No, fair enough.
I don't see in Jesus's
Fine.
example in the incarnation, because what Jesus did is he came down and lived out Hesed, which is the Hebrew word that gets translated as like long suffering, loving kindness. This word takes 20 minutes to explain, but it is something that as God is expressing Hesed for Israel. And you can see it in Hosea, you can see it in Ezekiel, the way that this plays out in all of the prophetic books. That God will God is taking God is taking any power and authority that he has, and he sits that down, and he comes with open hands and says in a very disarming way, I want to love you, return to me. There's That's not an exertion of a power or a control. That is a loving, unguarded, vulnerable welcoming back in. And Jesus comes in incarnation and he lives that out. And the only ones that he picks up that authority for are the ones like the Pharisees who are leading people into error. And so if you're going to try to make that an authoritarian type claim, I think you've got a problem where Jesus is living out Hesed, and the only time he picks up that authority is for those who are in error. So it's very much I lay down that thing that I control or can demand of you with open hands to welcome you in and show you love in that vulnerable way. And Jesus lives out that struggle in a tangible way that we could see, instead of that being an invisible God that we interact with in a spiritual way. Jesus does a very Hebrew thing with, he takes the abstract of the Old Testament's trying to show how God is Hesed with his people. Jesus does the living out part of of that Hebrew thought dynamic. It shows us the actual boots on the ground, what that's supposed to look like. And with anyone who is not leading people astray in error, you don't see Jesus using power and authority. He puts it down every opportunity and only really uses it with those who are in error.
Well, and the vision of the New Testament, at least as it relates to, say, church or marriage, is the person who is in charge, if that's not the right way to say it, but y'all know what I'm saying. The person who is seen to be having more social preeminence is told, is rarely, if ever, told to actually exercise that or use it. Or if they are told to use it, here's how you use it. It looks like you're actually doing the opposite of what a socially prominent or preeminent person would do. And so, if you look at leadership in the church, most of the language that's used, according to Jesus and Paul, is one of servant leadership. You want to be in charge, as Mark and Matthew say, be slave of all, not servant of all, slave of all. As Paul says in Philippians 2, if there's fellowship with the Spirit, if there's this, if there's that, there's all these things. Have the same mindset as Christ, who basically purged himself of his status and made himself like a slave, being born, taking the form of a slave. And so, if we want to talk about marriage or human relationships or church ministry, most of the time people want to talk about who's in charge. But who's in charge is not important. The New Testament image of that, and I would argue is entirely coordinate with the Old Testament, is one of self-giving. It's one of reverence. It is not self-consumed with power. It is not consumed with Greco-Roman visions of authoritarianism. It is concerned with the good of the other. And that reciprocity is integral to the life of the church. And that is why Paul uses the image of body, not one of subordination or overlordship. It's one of body and care for each other. And so it becomes very easy for a church, and I'm using church loosely, across the spectrum, to be consumed with hierarchical notions of who does what, when, where, and how, and miss the organic imagery of body that Paul and Jesus seem to very strongly utilize. And so, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, uh, Ephesians 5, I think it's 5:25, going down to something in the 30s. That piece of scripture, um, it's never, it's the instruction for husbands to love their wives in the same way Christ loves the church. It's not about authority. If anything, it's a call to take responsibility and um, uh, to maintain um, a relationship, right? And the reason why I said, just in case someone, who doesn't know, excuse me, what love is, right? I would go to 1 Corinthians chapter 13, right, where it talks about love is patient, love is kind, stuff like that, right? I'm just connecting these two to kind of illustrate what should be the core of that relationship, right? I'm not necessarily of the persuasion of um, egalitarianism necessarily. Um, I do think that men and women are different. I think that um, the leader of the household is male, but it's not suggesting that a woman can't be the leader of an household. But what makes someone the leader for an household, at least to me, solely comes down to, um, you know, the love and taking the ultimate responsibility for someone, um, for everything that happens within a household, and addressing everything based on love. Because in that same scripture, really the only instruction that was given to the wife was for her to just, she must respect her husband, and that's it. And so it's clear that the 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 person within the relationship that has the most responsibility and probably the most propensity to behave badly and to do corrupt and, as you say, rule over his wife, right, is the husband. And so, with that in mind, I think this piece of scripture makes sense. Um, obviously I'm not a husband yet, but I think this piece of scripture right here um, gives me a pretty good idea as to how I should love my wife, right? And um, how that love should show itself and how I should take care of my wife and my household. And I have the perfect example of that, which is Jesus Christ, who has taken up responsibility and behaves as a servant. He didn't come here to lord over us. He came here as a servant. And so I see the role of being a husband and being a father is the role of a servant, because you're not doing it for your own glory. You're doing it because you love your wife and your children. You love your household. That's the way how I kind of look at that.
Nurtured.
Well, I was waiting for Boss to say something. I can say something, but Boss can say something if she wants.
I think that if you want to go back to looking at, because I think you made a tie back to the fruit of the spirit, right, Batman? I think did I hear you make that tie there, or did I mishear you?
Can you repeat that question?
Did I hear you make a tie back to the fruit of the spirit, like you're supposed to be like love and like where was
Yeah,
that tie of the okay, was the fruit of the spirit, right?
yeah,
Okay.
because the
Right.
current relationship dynamics that we have
Right.
is because of the fall, right?
Right.
And with that in mind, right, we're given instructions by Christ
Mm-hmm.
as men, just talking from a male perspective, right, of how we should love our wives, and how we should treat our wives, which is supposed to be reflective of how Christ loves and treats the church, right, in the form of being a servant.
Okay. Maybe it's just me and I should let Nick handle this, but I'm hearing a contradiction in the thinking, because it's like husbands are supposed to take the headship role, but as a servant. And to me, it maybe it's just late and I'm just so stressed out that I'm not comprehending things very well at the moment. But I think it's hard to say if you want to claim to living that out in a Christ-like way, and you're going back to how that looks as the fruit that we bear in relationship to Christ and that fruit of the Spirit. Every single one of those things that are listed as fruit of the Spirit in our lives all echo the putting down of the power dynamic and open-handedly not exerting anything over anyone. Kindness doesn't exert any kind of authoritarian structure over anyone. It doesn't, love doesn't exert headship. Patience doesn't exert headship. Those are all postures of chesed, of open-handedly waiting, in long-suffering, patience. Because if you look at Ezekiel, Hosea, like God put up with that for a couple thousand years at least. Like there was a very long time God has put up with waiting for humanity to just come back, to come back and dwell with him. And that is the long suffering part of that. And it I guess I struggle with the idea, if you go back even further in Genesis chapter 1, and what we see there in that story, in that imagery, is not only is the picture and the balance not complete until there is both male and female, but they are both created in role of priest and priestess. And that's not, in that context, one is not outranking the other. There isn't really, they are given responsibility to cultivate and expand that garden. It is something that is supposed to work together in partnership, not one over the other. And together they are supposed to be responsible. And the way that the language works grammatically, if I understand it correctly, and the imagery that's portrayed in the language, that together as a unit they are responsible. But that word there is Adam, for human. And so we mistranslate that, because one of my biggest irks or pet peeves, I guess, misunderstandings of language and linguistics, but Hebrew specifically, and I don't know, Nick could answer this to talk about the Greek part, but in Hebrew, we get so stuck on, okay, here's this word, hesed. I'm going to go run to BDB. I'm going to go run to Hallett. I'm going to go pick up whichever lexicon that I like. And I'm going to pick from these, nine meanings that are in there. And I'm going to compare it to the Strong's number and go look at the concordance, and everywhere that comes up, and here's where all these words are. And there's a 1-to-1 correlation. If it means this here, it has to mean that there. And that is not at all how Hebrew works. Hebrew, what you see in the lexicon is a place to start. That is just a suggested list of what you start with that word. And there's so many factors to a word in Hebrew, with context and imagery. And it's so whimsical. And there's so much there that's left like saltwater taffy. You just got to chew on it to finally figure it out, which is why it takes 20 minutes to explain what hesed really means, because it's such a big word that you can't put all that just in, without creating an entire lexicon just for that word. It is not, when you get married and stuck to only what words are in the lexicon, and you don't give yourself the room that Hebrew has, because it can be used in different ways that aren't always put into a lexicon, because lexicons are supposed to be a reflection of the range of the meaning of a word, but not the tyrant that dictates what it has to mean. And so I think sometimes we have, in our scientific, logical minds, turned those into the dictator of what that has to mean, and taken away our right-brained imagination to engage with the bigger, beautiful range of things, the possibilities that could mean out of that list of 9 things, the way that word is in that one particular verse could mean 4 of those at the same time. So
I understand what you're saying. I'm just I think there's a conflation thing going on here, right? I don't associate taking responsibility for someone or something as lording over it,
Mhm.
right? There's a difference between those things. And so what that piece of scripture is doing, because remember, if it's a situation where because of the fall, right, you have a situation where men are lording over women, right? Right here, what Christ, right, what the Bible is telling us is, hey, listen, despite the current makeup, husbands, right, this is how you're supposed to treat your wife, right? Now, Christ being a servant, but also our Lord, right? He showed his love for the church, not not necessarily in terms of what he does for us atonement wise, right? But also as a teacher, as a brother, and a friend, right? And so I'm not using that scripture to justify ruling over anyone. Um, what I'm basically saying is it's a it's another instruction for husbands to take into consideration whenever they do have their wives, because I think it would make sense that once um, it is finished, God is all in all, right? This current dynamic that we have, right? It won't exist anymore because we're all in a perfected state. But since we're not in a perfected state, and people are going to be married and being in relationships, right? The Bible is telling us, hey, husbands, because you are in this position, we want you to do this. This is how you're supposed to treat your wives. That's really all that it's doing. I personally don't associate taking responsibility um, for someone as lording over them. Um, uh, when you lead someone, that's you're being a servant to them because you're teaching, right? You're doing a lot for that person, right? Especially especially when you're not getting paid for it, you're being a mentor, right? Um, so personally, I don't see leading or taking responsibility for other people as lording over them. You can
You,
still be a servant while
you
taking
could,
responsibility for them.
well, if from say egalitarian, just for lack of better words, an egalitarian position, you could say that reading is works both ways, doesn't it? The wife to
Yeah,
the husband to the wife. I mean, you could read it that way.
yeah,
It's
Well,
just
that's
yeah,
what
but
Ephesians 5 actually says at the beginning of the passage. So
yeah, I'm not saying you can't read it that way, right? But I'm just saying if it's a typical, considering the typical household back then and now, right? It's 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 imperative as far as I'm concerned that the average household where it's a situation where it's in a community or a culture where the husband, where there's not an egalitarian society, right? That husband has to live and love his wife in the way that is described in those passages. By no means are those passages promoting any type of power dynamic. If anything, it's telling the head of the household, the husband, to take responsibility and to love their family the same way Christ has loved the church. And Christ has loved the church to the point of his people, his children, to the point where he's willing to die for them.
I think the issue is I don't think head in that passage has, you might say, leadership or ruler or overlordship or even that sort of motif. It's simply a pairing of head and body, which probably suggests something like source. or life or something like that. So the language about the husband being the head of the wife or something like that probably doesn't denote authority, or it probably is not speaking to an authority relationship.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't say the husbands are the head. It just says husbands love, love your wives,
No,
basically.
the few verses beforehand,
Oh,
the
the
whole
few verses
passage.
before. Oh, okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm
So
I'm just.
you've got, so I mean technically if you go by Greek grammar and all that sort of stuff, the passage probably begins in verse 15 and continues on into chapter 6 verse, I think it's 9. Yeah, so you have husband, wife, parents, children, and slaves, masters, that sort of stuff. So it's all kind of a household unit. There is a lot of dispute over who is actually the head of the household in a Jewish or Greco-Roman society. Um, the households was more considered the realm of women. And we actually have language of that in the pastoral epistles where the language is a compound of oikos, home or house or administration, something like that, and desputane, the infinitival form of despotes, to rule, to have lordship. So there is some evidence, and I'm not saying it's all conclusive, because it's hard to be conclusive, in certain things, but the language of who is the head of the household is hotly debated in Jewish and Greco-Roman circles, but at least in that time. And so there is that element just to kind of consider that if women are called literally house rulers or house despots, depending on how you render it, but that's probably a wooden but probably literal understanding of the word, that suggests that husbands are not the head of the household, at least in the sense we use the term. That would actually be the wife, because the wife would be in charge of literally everything going on in the household. Oikos meaning having an administrative component too, like manager. So the husband would probably have very little actually to do in the household if he was even. And thinking of it in terms of authority in a Jewish context is probably unhelpful too. I'm not saying you're saying that, but just generally speaking, that's where it kind of goes. It's a little more Greco-Roman because they were more concerned with honor, shame, preeminence, status, all that sort of stuff. And Jews, and Boss can correct me if I'm wrong, but Jews were not as concerned by that. That's why you don't see these sorts of household codes in the Old Testament. Husbands do this, wives do this, children do this, slaves do this. You don't really have that. But when you have Gentiles and the way Gentiles think, and they're being converted, and the pagans are coming into the church, Paul and Peter will kind of, well, okay, let me speak to you in a way that you understand, because these household codes are all over the place in Greek literature and Roman literature. So there's a lot to say about the passage, but there is that sort of language of head, and how head is used in Ephesians, that Greek word. Um, it's used to describe Christ having some sort of head over or head of the powers, the principalities and powers in chapter 1, which does seem to suggest a sort of preeminence, or you might say over, or top or above. Um, but then it'll use the language of head as it relates to body, as it relates to Christians growing into into the head, kind of that organic somatic image. So suggesting that the head generates the body in terms of giving it life and provision. And since here the issue is, or the context is husbands and wives, i.e., Christians, the notion of head or even power, and I'm using that term neutrally, is not probably in the passage. Equals can submit to each other as they're told to do in Ephesians 5:21, being subject or submitting to one another out of reverence for Christ. Then Paul just gives kind of an example. Wives, same to your husbands as to the Lord. For the husband is the head of the wife, and so on and so forth. Then how husbands exercise that mutual submission is love. What makes that interesting is, as you were saying, Batman, in verses 5 and following, caring, presenting, washing, cleansing, all that sort of stuff. Husbands were not known in the ancient world for submitting to their wives. Wives, of course, there was a power dynamic, and that sort of thing, um, or at least in aspects of Greco-Roman culture, not so much in Jewish culture. But you do have a very interesting element here of what does mutual submission look like, and how do you explain that to, well, in this case, a Gentile man who has a wife who's probably, just going by social custom, probably half his age, because men tended to marry younger women back in the day. Not today, like, the billionaire kind of stuff, not quite like that. But, wives tended to be younger than their husbands, in the ancient world. That's just kind of how it went. Um, so here, what does mutual submission, what does that look like? And how do you explain that to a husband who's never had to do it, and has become a Christian and wants to follow Christ. Well, much of what you said is actually fair, but it looks like love, giving yourself up, making her holy by cleansing her with the washing of water by the word. But notice the language of washing, spot and wrinkle or blemish, tender or love, nourishes. Those are
Yep.
household. Um, those are that's what we would call woman's work in the ancient world. Those are kind of images that would be associated with household activities. So what you have here is a call to mutual submission, yielding to one another. And for the husband, Paul's like, okay, you don't know how this looks, and that's perfectly fine. I'm not holding that against you. But here is 33 verses that are gender exclusive or gender specific to the husband. The wife knows what mutual submission looks like because she knows what submission looks like. She has to do it. But here, Paul's like, here's how this looks for you. It looks like love, looks like caring, looks like what your wife does for you, so to speak. And that's kind of one of those things where I think the language of responsibility is helpful, just as long as it's governed by, the beginning of the passage of, making most of the time, don't be foolish, be filled with the Spirit, singing songs, making melody, giving thanks to God the Father, being subject to one another out of reverence for Christ. And so I think Paul's language here is, well, it would offend every single man who became a Christian in the ancient world, almost as much as telling a pagan to be circumcised. It's not a good sell. Um, but it is interesting that the language that Paul uses is directly, well, straight up is basically, you see what your wife does for you? Yeah. Do that for her. Oh. And so that's what I think the passage is. That's why love is there. It's not that he's not supposed to love, or even, as I'm sure you would agree, wives aren't to love their husbands by any means. I think we would all agree with that. Um, but there is that sense, I think, of Paul's trying to get the husband to identify with the wife, to understand his wife, and to recognize that thinking in terms of preeminence is not the way this works, but thinking in terms of, look what she does for you, reciprocate that. And that actually fits with 1 Corinthians 7, which is a very long passage on marriage where Paul actually talks about sex and actually uses authority language. The husband has no authority over his own body, but the wife does. Likewise, or in the same way, the wife has no authority over her own body, but the husband does. That sort of actual sexual counterbalance and all that sort of stuff. And so I agree with you in part that I think you've actually captured the responsibility aspect. I think that responsibility, excuse me, I was fighting a sneeze and a yawn at the same time, is governed by mutual yielding, mutual gifting, and all that. It could be, and practically speaking, it could be that a wife might have gifts that a husband doesn't, and she's like, no, I'd rather, and this is common. I like being a stay-at-home mom. I like you dealing with the finances. I like you making a lot of these decisions, and you can have that deference, but that's a deference that is chosen, not one that is assumed, and that only happens through, as Paul says elsewhere, through mutual prayer, through giving, through understanding. And it could be the husband says the same thing to the wife. Look, hey, I'm not good at these things. I defer to you, and that's just part of mutual submission and just listening to one another and working it out, and not just being, we might say, matriarchal or patriarchal, but mutual. Neither has supreme authority on the basis of gender, but yields that to the other. And so that allows for women to be women and men to be men, but not to be governed by the old Greco-Roman model of, well, authoritarianism or lordship or whatever we want to call it, even neutrally conceived. So I hope that at least makes sense to kind of
I
nuance
mean,
what you're saying and add some
no,
more to it.
it makes sense. It's just that I don't, then again, I think part of this is because I've had plenty of conversations in the past about like um authority and responsibility, like plenty of debates. Um, it, it, it- yeah, it's hours talking about this stuff and kind of like dispelling the association with them, right? Because I used to think that way, where it's like, just I have responsibility over you. That means I own you. It's like, no, it's not. That's not what it is. It's not what it means, right? My dad didn't own my mother, right? he took responsibility for my mom and the stuff that my mom is good at, just like you said, she did, and the stuff that he's good at, he did, right? Everyone's contributing to raising the family, right? It just so happens when it comes to certain things that where, the thief comes down, breaks in or whatever, the dad has the physical and mental capacity to go and address that particular issue, right? It just so happens when it comes to in this world, a lot of it is grounded in male energy, right? Um, it's a situation where the male, being that he has more responsibility, and the truth of the matter is that if you have more responsibility towards a group of people, they have to be willing to relinquish, right, some control in order for you to do what you're supposed to do as a leader, right? However, as a leader, you should have the ability to delegate, right? If you're not good at something, right, whoever that is following you, you should be able to be like, okay, I can't do this. Can you please do this?
If a woman would like me to boss her around, I would be happy to oblige with love, but only if she wants me to. But and I'm kind of serious about that. That's kind of how I would operate. I have operated. But this is the funniest thing I've ever seen. This is so rad. Whoever came up with this is so saved that they could eat babies and they would remain saved.
I feel attacked.
I'm
No, it's a compliment. Like,
What?
it's a compliment. It's totally a compliment.
You made me fat. Like that's not cool. I'm half that dude's weight, and I'm like three
you're
times as tall
saved
as
though,
him.
man. You're saved.
Oh, barely.
Hey, tell me something honestly, because this is funny to me. This is where like my personality meets my religious commitments in my church or whatever, right? And I'm like the guy who wants to be like lighten up a little bit, like to my throat, as like a layman, being like, I respect being conservative and like holy and everything, but like at the same time, I'm like, you're turning people away. So I'm like, I do stuff like this. Is that inappropriate?
I mean, it's just Jesus holding a bird. Evolution's true. That's just Jesus being nice to a bird. So that's cool.
A chicken.
Yeah, it's just Jesus loves chickens. There we go. Big angry chickens.
Okay, I actually think this is I find this. So look, I'm a fan of the Jesus like holding the broken children and like the lamb, and it's a moving picture, like when I'm in a mood for that. But at the same time, like I'd like to say like the atheists make this haha funny, like old earth creationists are idiots. But even if you're not an old earth creationist, it's like, well, what are you gonna do with this idea? Is the velociraptor gonna lay down with the whatever, with your kids or whatever? And
I mean,
I actually find it
lions are worse than velociraptors, probably. And they lay down with lambs.
I actually think that's fun. I think that's kind of cool. Like I'm just like something Christians should think about. I mean, it's supposed to be like a gotcha, but I think it's actually kind of funny, and I think it's like something that's worth thinking about.
Well, you're well, that I can't speak to that. I've never met you, so but I think there is. I don't know. Like you're talking to the guy who got in trouble one time for making a joke, and like, yeah, you've seen the jokes I make from behind the pulpit sometimes. Like I just lighten up everyone. Like I don't know, have a sense of humor. Here's the rule. If I see someone post a meme or talk smack, I just kind of go, if you can't take the joke, you're not allowed to make the joke. I can take a joke as someone who's barely safe. Please, Batman, I'm sorry, I spoke over you. My bad.
No, you used a term called sense of humor. I was asking, what are those?
It's the sixth sense, technically.
Oh yeah, I appreciate sarcasm. I am Jamaican, and that's like a huge part of how we communicate is with a lot of sarcasm. And so if you do not, if you don't have thick skin, you can be very easily offended by how Jamaicans might communicate with you, even though they do their best to be considerate of the fact that most people are not going to appreciate the type of sarcasm that we engage in and stupid and sometimes brutal jokes. So, as someone who appreciates those things, um, like Jamie does, that's why I'm always chuckling when he when he makes like these mocking ideas and terms. My favorite is the workstationist.
Yeah, I'm trying to keep it fun and mock people that I think are silly, and then try to recognize that in myself and be like, "Oh, you think Ellen White's theology is bad, do you? Well, all I know is that's true." Or and then when I'm friendly with the Calvinists, I'll be like, if you're gonna attack my theology, why don't you go after your own redheaded stepchild that's got a bad attitude? And I mean, I want people to lighten up a little more so that they can help me to lighten up a little bit more. That's kind of the point. Because
Yeah,
when I see people do that and then I realize I'm doing that, I turn red. I get hot in the face, if you will.
he just doesn't want to blush. People could see him.
It's hard to make me blush anymore, but you probably could. But
I know I did one time.
can you blush? Well, I love you guys, but I think I'm
It's
gonna.
been a very
Pause.
long night. I think I'm ready to call it.
Cool.
He's the boss,
So,
so
The boss says.
so wait. Everybody can have one word. I will end with no one is saved except for me, and I only am friends with any of you because you leave a cracked door where I think I can sneak in and compel you to agree with me. But the moment you refuse, door is slammed. Goodbye. It's over. And so, if you don't like that, oh, am I kidding? Is he kidding? Yes, he's kidding. Love you guys.
Dude said we get one word and took 10 minutes to explain it.
I okay. I just want to point out that Jesus is God. He is a father. He is a priest. He is a lamb. He is a man. He is a door. He is made out of bread and wine. And he's also spirit.
Baptist.
You're saved.
That's my one word. Baptist.
Not saved. Saved.
My one word is tacos, and that's it.
Not saved. Good night. Love you guys. Just having fun. Please understand I'm tired and I'm saying weird stuff, but these are my good friends who I love. And even if they never agree with me, I'm going to love them, except for Nick. But besides that, God bless. You have to follow Jesus or you don't know Jesus. But God is merciful, so there's always that.